This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto turned evil because of village's harsh treatment. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Pain blood streaming, fist throbbing, eyes clenched as Naruto soared past his falling opponent, he felt the sensation of falling. Like some prerogative irony, he saw his own face instead of the girlish-looking boy he'd met the day before after the porcelain mask broke into a million pieces. It was only for a moment, though an optical illusion, a sense of connection between two shattered souls who had been cast aside. Both of them stood on opposing sides of the same ideal, despite the fear and malice they had displayed in their brief lives. Naruto gave a harsh grunt but ignored the agony and rose to confront his astonished opponent. "Fuck you. You think just because he took you in you owe your life to him? That your life has no meaning without him?" Naruto stopped for a moment. "You're right, though you and I, despite being both shinobi, are different. While you accept your fate of being tossed aside, I refuse to just sit idly by and be used as others see fit. I can't accept that fate. I will fight for what I deem precious, and not what others declare as such. My name is Uzumaki Naruto and I am going to show you just how wrong you are." 24 hours ago, when Naruto opened his eyes, he saw a vivid blue morning. He had nearly exhausted himself working. His mind was filled with the lovely aroma of flowers as the grass around him brushed against his bare skin. The blonde's surroundings weren't as lovely as the scent had suggested. The trees closest to the genin were slashed and scorched. Naruto had come to the realization that he couldn't hold anything back ever since the battle between Zabuza and Kakashi. He needed to work on the Forbidden Scrolls jutsu. After a lot of practice, some of them were usable, but others were impossible given Naruto's current condition. Naruto had been sleeping as a result of that rigorous practice. He had been staying later than Sensei and his teammates because he was overworking himself. "Ah, you're finally awake." The smooth voice's source immediately drew Naruto's attention. He was alert when he saw a woman picking flowers. She was a stunning woman. She wore a pink kimono, and there was a hint of worry on her face. "Even though she seems fragile, Naruto never lets his guard down. He was well aware that your worst suffering could come from the most innocent of faces. Are you all right? Have you been abandoned?" As the protector attracted the woman's attention, Naruto's forehead was adorned with the leaf insignia. Her gaze strayed to Naruto's forehead. The girl produced a rag, and the blonde's sweaty body was in a defensive stance. "You're sweating, may I?" She held out the rag and gazed expectantly at him. After giving it some thought, the blonde shook his head and continued. "Who are you?" The woman smiled and put the rag away without responding. "I couldn't help but notice your headband. Are you a leaf shinobi?" After blinking, Naruto touched his headband gently with his left hand. He nodded his head, but remained suspicious. He then pointed a kunai at her after revealing it. "I won't ask again. Who are you?" The woman gave the blonde a smile as if he had told a joke that was mildly amusing. She turned to face him and said, "I am a friend, Ninja-san." Grinning, she took a flower from the basket she was carrying and set it down directly beside the boy. "Flowers are lucky, aren't they?" the girl started. Naruto was asked the question, but he remained silent, still wary of the stranger in front of him. He had no idea why she was there, but she would have killed him while he was asleep if she had intended to do so. The stranger stared at him, waiting for an answer, but he gave her none. "All they have to do is sit there and be beautiful. They haven't a care in the world. They're a very good tool for conveying love and affection. Sometimes I think it is a shame that humans don't stand for love and affection, don't you?" Once more ignoring the question, Naruto wondered what the stranger was up to. A mystery hovered over his head. "What do you stand for, Ninja-san? What does your village stand for?" Uncertain of whether or not to respond, Naruto averted his gaze. There was a heavy silence between them before the boy spoke. There was complete silence for several minutes. "What are you doing here? Do you have anybody precious to you?" the stranger asked after pausing to say, "I am picking herbs for a precious friend, Ninja-san." The blonde had no trouble answering this question. He did, in fact, have a very special someone who loved the blonde and endured the same hardships as Naruto. "Yes." The girl, holding a flower in her fingers, smiled at him. "Would you do anything to protect that friend, even at the expense of becoming a tool of destruction?" "Yes. To ensure Kit's safety and survival, he would murder as many people as necessary." "Even at the cost of your life?" Answering this question was not so simple. Would he give up his life to save someone else's? Would he forfeit his opportunity to exact revenge on everyone who has wronged him? Did he really think he would? "No, I wouldn't die for anybody. I have important things I must do before I die." The girl asked more questions after displaying a puzzled expression. "But aren't ninjas required to die for the betterment of their village? If you aren't even willing to sacrifice yourself for your friends, then why become a tool for the village to use and dispose of?" At those words, the blonde's fists clenched. He was not a tool to be discarded by the populace, he was no inconsequential pawn. I am not a tool, Naruto declared angrily, startling the stranger. I am not some object for the villages to use. I am better than that. I have dreams, goals, and feelings. I am so much more than a mere tool. The stranger asked Naruto to clarify, isn't that the way ninja are treated? I don't care. I wouldn't expect a girl like you to understand, Naruto replied. You weren't hated for something that you couldn't control. You have no idea what it is like be treated like dirt. Being treated as a tool is no different. After giving him a smile, the stranger got up, turned, and left. By the way, Ninja-san, I am a boy. With a shout, there you are, Baka. Ino walked over to the boy. I've been looking everywhere for you. The blonde grumbled as Naruto made his way back to the clearing where the group had been training. Kakashi-sensei and the others are waiting on you. Naruto remained silent. He simply continued to walk. Ino asked, hey, are you alright? But got no response. What's wrong with? Ino scowled as she ran in front of Naruto. Pausing in the middle of her sentence to get a clear view of his face, he appeared completely shaken, and his eyes were wide. With occasional twitches, Naruto started to return to the clearing, saying, he's a boy. That was the prettiest boy I've ever seen, even prettier than. Ino was more perplexed than she had ever been in her life when she asked, who's prettier than who? Ino continued to stare, unsure of how to respond to this. Naruto, creepiest moment of my life, she said. Chakra detection is all about concentration. We have to channel the chakra through our bodies and into the ground form a wave. Chakra detection is similar to echolocation and it requires quite a bit of. Kakashi stopped when he noticed Ino and Naruto entering folds. Well, it's finally nice to have the full class here. We are going over chakra detection, Naruto. While Ino moved next to Sakura and Hinata, Naruto nodded and moved next to Sasuke and Shikamaru, preferring the comfort of his team over the all-girl squad. Now, in order to echolocate, you have to send your chakra out in bursts of waves, expanding it out of your body. Since sources of chakra, such as animals and people, don't absorb chakra, it rebounds back, effectively giving away the source's location. Sensor types come in numerous shapes and sizes, making them high-value priorities for both allies and enemies. Take out the sensor and you make your enemy blind. However, if everyone can sense chakra, it's not as big a blow as it normally would be. Of course, sensing isn't for everybody. It is immensely difficult because your complete focus must be on controlling and shaping it into the correct form for an accurate reading. The genins looked at each other impatiently. While chakra concentration was not too difficult, this was a whole new level. Sasuke didn't think any of them would advance very far in it. Shikamaru put his hands behind his back and yawned. This is troublesome. Listen, sensei. This is too much to ask of us. I doubt that we can master this within a year, let alone a couple of days, or however long we have, he said. Listen, genius, I don't need you to master this. I just need you to be good enough to detect some chakra. Hinata, Kakashi said to the shy girl, is the only one that has an edge on the mist jutsu. 1 out of 6 is not a good advantage. I don't care if you can't tell whose chakra it is. All I care about is that you can sense it. That's all that's important. Sometimes, you don't have the time to prep for a battle properly, and you have to scramble and use what you got. After demonstrating how to channel your chakra into the wave-like bursts, Kakashi left them to do it on their own. He simply read his favorite book while leaning against a tree. Hey, Sakura, you never did tell us what happened when you tried to find Naruto, Ino said as they were taking a break. I mean, it's not every day you storm after him like that. You into him or something? As if, I only went after him because I felt bad for the way we treated him. I mean, the things he said to that boy were. Sakura said, looking at her blonde friend incredulously. She didn't know how to express her disgust and sadness. The fact that she was a part of the suffering Naruto must have been going through only made her feel worse. She couldn't help but think about how depressed he must be. With Hinata and Sasuke sitting next to them and Shikamaru and Naruto training on the field, Ino tried to reassure her pink-haired friend, saying, hey, it's alright. I would have gone. Sakura interrupted Ino, shocking the three, saying, then why didn't you? It would have been better if you went with me. Well, Ino started, unsure of how to respond, but Sakura interrupted her. Sakura turned to face the white-eyed heiress and said, I mean, I shouldn't have been the one to go. Hinata, don't you like Naruto? Why didn't you go with me? Heck, you should have been the first to go after him. Hinata turned away from her friends as the statement and question struck her hard. She should have gone, but she was too timid and afraid, and she was ashamed of herself too. That was why, despite Naruto's suffering, she had never attempted to assist him. She had been watching ever since Naruto saved her on that fateful day. Despite having witnessed everything, she had taken no action. This was merely one more thing to put on her list of shortcomings. Hinata was unable to respond to her. She was aware of Sakura's correctness. Sakura said, becoming quiet at the end, Didn't you guys feel sad for Naruto? I mean, the things Kakashi said? Ino remarked, of course I did. I mean, who knew? Sasuke's fists clenched slightly as she recalled what Inari had said. It also resonated with her in a way. She could relate to Naruto's suffering, she could even relate to his rage at him. She was nearly as affected by the boy's words as Naruto was. She was not alone, even though she lived alone, not Naruto. At least she had friends who had offered her a room with other people instead of living alone in a vacant apartment with only the necessities. What did Naruto possess? Perhaps less than that, and he was really alone. He was so alone that a little fox was his only company. However, she was more familiar with the anger than the loneliness, the resentment of not understanding that she wanted to take control of her destiny rather than alter it. But simpletons refused to acknowledge the immense amount of suffering that remained in her heart. Naruto's was a lifetime. While hers was only 6 years, a lifetime of suffering and isolation. She was astounded that his resolve had not yet crumbled. Sakura rounded on her and said, "And what about you, Sasuke? You are his teammate, and yet you won't help him. You should have gone and apologized, just like I did." Honestly, Sakura said, getting to her feet and glancing at the three of them. You three are completely unbelievable. You're one to talk. Sakura, you are one of the worst offenders on numerous occasions. You have gone out of your way to put Naruto down. If anybody needs to apologize to him, it needs to be you, and you owe him more than one. Sakura stumbled a few times, searching for a counter but failing. She had frequently made fun of Naruto in public, even in front of him, in an effort to blend in with the other kids. The cruelty with which she had treated someone who had done her no harm caused tears to well up and fall down her cheeks. At least I'm trying. Sasuke, I know I've done horrible things, but I want to make up for them. Even if you never made fun of him, you still never really stood up for him. You're not as innocent in this as you think. She was willing to start making amends with the blonde, even though her past actions were irrelevant. Stop it. Both of you arguing isn't going to solve anything, not to mention this isn't the time. Ino interrupted just as Sasuke was about to respond. Sakura is right, though all of us should have gotten to know Naruto before judging him. He deserves our apologies. We will do it at the end of the mission, Ino said, casting a quick glance toward the area where Naruto and Shikamaru were still sparring. Sakura wiped away her tears so that neither Shikamaru nor Naruto could see them and said, Thank you, Ino." A familiar scene greeted Naruto as his eyes opened. He was once more gazing up at the sky, completely worn out from the work he had done with the girls and his teammates the previous day. However, there was a difference. It seemed as though the morning had grown darker, more like the afternoon. It was several minutes before he realized he had slept in too late. Naruto hurried to his feet and glanced around to make sure he had everything. The blonde hurried to Tazuna's house in a rage, all of his belongings packed and ready to go. He did not want to miss his meal again. He found the house while pushing his aching and sore body. Kurenai said, "Hey, Naruto," as Naruto walked into the dining room where she, Tsunami, and Inari were eating. Kid was dozing off in the corner. Kakashi and the others took Tazuna-san to the bridge, Kurenai remarked. "They left me behind because I am still recovering, so you'll be late if you don't hurry up." With the sword sheathed at his side, Naruto nodded and bounded out of the house. Tsunami exclaimed, "Hey, Ninja Kid. What about your breakfast?" Tsunami sighed as the blonde hurried past her and headed for the bridge. Tsunami muttered, "Men," and turned back to Kurenai and Inari. The sword struck his side as he was moving, but Naruto ignored the odd looks he received from those he passed. He slowed down because he wasn't yet accustomed to running with the weapon. He was only concerned with reaching the bridge. Naruto sprinted out of town and into the shrubbery, deciding that it would be quicker to go through forest. "Hey, Leaf Kid." Naruto came to a complete halt. He narrowed his eyes, trying to find out where the voice was coming from. In front of Naruto were two figures brandishing katanas. In anticipation of anything these two swordsmen might attempt, Naruto stiffened up. The person wearing the hat smirked and asked, "What are you doing?" His companion chose to grin similarly. They were both holding their swords by the hilts. The question caused Naruto to blink in mild surprise, but he chose to bring one of his own back. "What am I doing?" he asked, looking at the two with intense curiosity. He didn't have time to deal with them, but he would lose if he engaged in a sword-to-sword battle with them. Naruto had no experience wielding a sword. "Yeah," said the person wearing the eye patch. "What are you doing?" Naruto's eyes darted from one to the other as he slowly reached for his kunai pouch. He needed to ensure they didn't see anything. He concluded that carrying on the conversation would be the most effective way to divert their attention. Naruto said, "Nothing," as his hand continued to twitch toward the kunai. The person with the hat said, "Nothing, huh? We noticed you're wearing a shinobi headband." His hand was on his sword's hilt, ready to draw it and go to battle. "So I am. What of it?" Naruto asked in response, carrying on the joke. His hand was still creeping toward his kunai pouch. The Ipak one went on, You one of the shinobi that bridge builder hired? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, Eyepatch went on. If you are, that would be bad. The other said, yeah, we would have to kill you. They both took a step toward the genin. In an attempt to buy himself more time, Naruto questioned, why, in just a few seconds, he had to have enough time to hit them both down. You might thwart our plans. What's your plan? Inquired Naruto. The one with the hat licked his lips. We are supposed to kidnap the bridge builder's whore of a daughter, he said. Eyepatch prepared to attack and asked, so, are you trying to thwart our plans? His smile vanished, and the mercenary adopted an intense expression. Naruto pretended to think for a moment before answering, yes. Then we are going to have to kill you, really? Inquired Naruto. Really? That's too bad. Why is that? Because I already killed you. The hell are you? The hat-wearing man was severed when a kunai pierced his jugular vein. He witnessed his companion suffer the same fate as he fell, life ebbing from him. Naruto approached the two corpses and took out his weapons before making his way to the bridge. Sorry, but I don't have time to deal with the two of you, he said. Before Shikamaru grumbled, I can't believe you let Naruto sleep in again but not me, as he and the other shinobi reached the bridge with Tazuna. Shut up Shikamaru, we couldn't find Naruto, that's the only reason we didn't drag him along too. You're not the only one who's tired, Ino said with a scowl. All of you quiet now, Kakashi commanded sternly. The two were arguing when Kakashi's tone distracted them, and they ran into Sakura and Sasuke, who were ahead of them in their current position around Tazuna. The genin's gaze shifted to the blood and gore of what had once been Tazuna's crew. There were body parts all over the place. Hinata, Sakura, and Ino were appalled. They found it too unbelievable. Shikamaru gazed in awe at his first real-life instance of ruthless manslaughter. Disengaged from the death toll, Sasuke absorbed it all and prepared herself for the impending battle. Tazuna just didn't get his lunch as he moved forward and emerged from the dense fog. Zabuza started to laugh and said, it would seem, you were wrong. Hitaki, I hope you prepared those brats to embrace death. Shikamaru grumbled, I can't believe you let Naruto sleep in again but not me, as he and the other shinobi reached the bridge with Tazuna. Shut up Shikamaru, we couldn't find Naruto, that's the only reason we didn't drag him along too. You're not the only one who's tired, Ino grumbled at the sluggish genin. All of you quiet now, Kakashi gave the order in a severe manner. The two were in their current formation around Tazuna when they bumped into Sakura and Sasuke, who were ahead of them, after Kakashi's tone confused them. The genin looked around, taking in the sights of the former Tazuna's crew, their blood and gore. There were body parts all over the place. Hinata, Sakura, and Ino were appalled. They found it too unbelievable. Shikamaru gazed in awe at his first real-life instance of ruthless manslaughter. Disengaged from the death toll, Sasuke absorbed it all and prepared herself for the impending battle. Tazuna just didn't get his lunch as he moved forward and emerged from the dense fog. Zabuza started to laugh and said, it would seem, you were wrong. Hitaki, I hope you prepared those brats to embrace death. Ino saw that there was blood everywhere. This was a slaughter, not a struggle. She was afraid of this monster of a man named Zabuza. The blonde was afraid she would die if she looked into that monster's eyes, so she refrained from doing so. Her hands would not respond when she attempted to move them to her kunai pouch. Her hands were shaking with fear and she was out of breath. Ino felt terrified. She was unable to move because she was so terrified. She stood staring at the bloody horror in front of her, her body trembling. Ino was afraid for her life for the first time. Ino wasn't by himself. Her teammates were standing there, terrified and motionless. Hinata's eyes were as wide and trembling as ever. The same was true for her friend with pink hair. The blonde saw that Sasuke was stoic. The Uchiha's face was expressionless. The carnage had no effect on her. Shikamaru appeared stunned, as though someone had given him sleeping pills, and Kakashi, his sensei, had the same expression as Sasuke. Ino pondered whether she would adopt that appearance when facing death by the end of her ninja career. How frequently would she witness death? Her eyes attempted to leave the gory scene, but they were unable to do so. The blood was horribly captivating her eyes. Ino managed to move her eyes and saw that monster, Zabuza, staring at the group with smug confidence. His blood-stained sword, the demon of the hidden mist, was grinning because he was pleased with the deed he had just performed. Ino felt ill from that. There was no reason for anyone to enjoy this. Killing should only be done in extreme cases and as a last resort. However, Ino observed that it appeared to occur far more frequently than it ought. To the sudden realization that she had also killed the Chunin ninja who had previously attacked them made her stomach turn. She took a life, even though it might have been an accident. This isn't a game, this is life or death. He isn't going to get back up just because you feel bad. You'll have to live with the fact that you ended a life. His hopes and dreams are over because of you, and you'll be expected to do it again and again in name of country and village. You wanted to be ninja, and this is being ninja, killing and being killed. That's what you wanted to be. Killers. Ino recalled the words of Kakashi at that time. She wanted to be a ninja because, to be honest with herself, it promised adventure, exotic places to see, and attractive boys to date. Her father was proud of her as well. As Ino looked at the various body parts scattered all over the place, she thought, maybe Kakashi-sensei was right, maybe I shouldn't have become a ninja. With his gaze fixed on Zabuza, Kakashi uttered the words, Ino, Sakura, Shikamaru, protect our client, do not let anything happen to him. As they formed up around Tazuna, who still appeared queasy, the three Kakashi addressed nodded with her attention back on the mission. Ino took Tazuna's right side. With her gaze fixed on Hinata, Sasuke asked her, Sensei, what about us? With a kunai in his right hand, Sasuke is ready to defend. A figure appeared next to the demon of the mist and said, you'll be facing me. Zabuza-sama wants to duel Kakashi of the Sharingan alone. When Zabuza killed him, Sasuke saw that the masked hunter Nin was the one who picked up his body. The princess of Uchiha stiffened. Kakashi looked at the two gravely and said, and whatever you do, stay out of the fight between me and Zabuza. Sasuke, Hinata, I'll be relying on you to keep that hunter Nin busy. After giving a nod, Sasuke prepared to fight. The Hyuga heiress appeared nervous. She knew she was better suited to protect the client and wasn't a fighter. Do not humiliate the clan. Hinata's fists clenched a little. Yes, this was her opportunity to prove herself to her father back home as well as to her friends. She was going to give it her all. She wasn't the failure he had pictured her as. Her features blazed with determination as she pondered that idea. It was the masked shinobi who initiated contact. Sasuke saw the senba and needles flying toward her and Hinata, but it was only a flick of the wrists. It moved with nearly lightning speed with those. This masked shinobi was extremely proficient. Sasuke was quicker. She threw a few kunai at their opponent and shoved herself and Hinata out of the way of the flying projectiles. Sasuke hurled some shuriken before charging at the hunter Nin, saying, Hinata, we got to make sure that none of those needles happen to reach Tazuna-san. After giving a nod, Hinata threw some of her own shuriken and kunai at the Nin in the mask. Zabuza threw some punches and remarked, it seems your genin have gotten better since we last fought, Kakashi. Kakashi looked at Sasuke and Hinata attempting to fight Zabuza's proto-copyright ga copyright and dodged deftly. He paused as he realized something. You know, trying to distract me won't work. Zabuza, I am confident that my pupil can take your… Zabuza grinned. Ah, you finally noticed. Huh? Kakashi looked down and suddenly felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen. He was standing in a puddle, but the ice was now clinging to his legs and freezing his feet. His eyes grew wide, and he started hand signing right away. Fire style. Fire concentration. As fire roared through Kakashi's lower body, the ice surrounding his feet started to melt quickly. The fire extinguished shortly after the water and ice had all evaporated, and Kakashi gazed at Zabuza. You aren't an ice user. Zabuza smiled once more as Kakashi turned to look at a second copy of the hunter Nin. You're right, Kakashi, I'm not. However, the kid behind you is. With 5 senba and needles in each hand, ready to throw, this version was introduced to the Sharingan user. What happened to you wanting to fight me alone? Kakashi asked, dodging the boy's lunge and using his free hand to place a paper bomb on the younger Nin's back. Kakashi used his chakra to activate it. Without hesitation, the body vanished in a tiny, controlled explosion, leaving behind massive ice fragments. Zabuza swung his massive cleaver-style sword at Kakashi and questioned, clones aren't exactly people, are they? In the nick of time, Kakashi dodged the sword swung just above his head, severing a few of his white hairs that floated freely in front of him. Kakashi reached for his headband with his left hand and raised it. Zabuza swung his sword and exclaimed, ha ha, finally, the man who copied 1,000 jutsu gets serious. Kakashi sidestepped once more while surveying the situation with his newly exposed Sharingan eye. His hands moved in a flurry of various hand signals, dropping low. Water style. Snake's mouth. Kakashi's hand exploded into a massive, spinning column of water that resembled a snake with its mouth wide open. The water snake suddenly headed for Zabuza. The demon of the hidden mist was sounded by the water, which then started to swallow him up. Zabuza swung his sword down on the bridge's stonework, causing the water to part around him. Interesting, Kakashi, but that's not going to work. The three guarding Tazuna were taken aback by the volume of water surrounding them. How strong Zabuza was to totally deflect the water snake, and how strong Kakashi must be to call forth such a monster. When Kakashi called forth so much water, Ino was shocked that the bridge didn't flood. It must have spilled into the salty water below after running off the bridge. Zabuza hurled 4 kunai at his opponent in a flash. The Sharingan eye was not like the others. It had witnessed the projectile's unnaturally rapid movements, and Kakashi's body responded by dodging 2 of the 4. Barely nicked his arms, leaving a shallow cut on both appendages, and Kakashi grunted. I wonder how well your genin are faring against Haku. You should focus on me, Zabuza. 3 hand signals were flashed by Kakashi. The 3 hand signals for ox, rabbit, and monkey were formed in that order, and his hands were a blur before the formation of the blue lightning chakra. Kakashi pointed both palms toward the ground. The sight was magnificent around Kakashi. The air started to fizzle and crackle. The nearby genin's hair stood on end at the sudden surge of electricity in the air. Lightning blade. Kakashi charged Zabuza, prepared to finish this with a single blow, but Zabuza was up to something else. They stood locked as he swung his sword to block the lightning chakra sticking out of his opponent's hand. The electric chakra that coiled and crackled around his blade was constantly attacking it. The demon of the hidden mist was struggling to maintain his position. He was suffering greatly from defying Kakashi's jutsu. As he stood his ground, his arms began to hurt. Zabuza grinned, his toothy grin concealed by the gauze. I will not lose to it, as expected. Kakashi, I have heard stories of the lightning blade, but... Zabuza started to push back the lighting that came from Kakashi's hand with the tremendous strength that had been developed over years of training. His body was under more stress, and he was grunting. He managed to push it back completely at last, enough to protect himself from it, anyway. The strong jutsu of the Sharingan user gradually disappeared in an attempt to divert Zabuza's attention until he could come up with a new strategy. Kakashi threw kunai right away. Zabuza quickly blocked the kunai as it flew through the air, neutralizing the projectiles with his sword. Zabuza charged the white-haired shinobi, and they clattered to the ground. With one sword swipe after another, Zabuza continued his frontal attack. His movements had a subtle control and were fluid. It would appear that Zabuza was merely slashing if an untrained eye were to watch him battle Kakashi. Observing the battle while protecting the bridge builder, Ino questioned incredulously, what's going on? Zabuza is just hacking away at Kakashi-sensei. Does he really think random slashes will work against him? Her hold on the kunai she was holding was loosening a little as she focused all of her energy on Kakashi's battle with Zabuza. That's not it, Shikamaru said, his tone devoid of the usual slackness. Zabuza's style only mimics randomness. If you watch closely, he is definitely planning each attack on Kakashi-sensei. Yamanaka, a blonde, squinted as she attempted to watch the fight intently. She attempted, but was unable, to understand the planning Shikamaru claimed was involved in each strike. In fact, Zabuza appeared to be possessed and uncontrollable. The more she observed him, watching the demon of the hidden mist's movements sent shivers down her spine. They appeared to be fluid, and there was an unsettling motion to them, as though Zabuza were not a human. All he was doing was striking. Even the bandages covering his face could not hide the sadistic smile that was firmly fixed on Zabuza's face. He was terrifying. Zabuza was a real demon. It probably took him quite an amount of time to develop the style he is using. Shikamaru's voice broke in Ino's gloomy thoughts before speaking to Nara, who is typically sluggish. She mentally shook off her earlier ideas. What style? It's just random slashes. Ino felt irritated. She was obviously missing something, and Shikamaru, being a lazy ass, could see it. She was irritated by that. She glanced back at Zabuza, who was still attempting to cut Kakashi with a series of sword motions. Nevertheless, it appeared to be irrational, violent, and extremely crazy. With a hint of annoyance, Shikamaru told Ino, "You're not getting it, man. This is troublesome. Look how he moves. What does it remind you of?" he said with a sigh. Glancing back at that monster, the blonde gulped. The situation remained unchanged. Zabuza just had a non-human appearance. He appeared to be. She shuddered and muttered under her breath, possessed. She now had a firm hold on the kunai in her hand. Exactly, Zabuza has created a unique style, one that strikes fear into the hearts of the inexperienced, and, Kakashi nodded to Shikamaru, creates a false opening for those that aren't so intimidated. It's purely psychological. So, Zabuza is just waiting for Kakashi to make a move. And when he does, it might be the thing that he wants it to be? Shikamaru gave a nod, but Ino failed to notice. All she could think about was the fight between the two shinobi masters. Guys, Sakura said, drawing the other two genins' attention, Sasuke and Hinata. Everyone watched Sasuke and Hinata battle the masked nin. With the exception of Kakashi and Zabuza, their hopes were not being fulfilled. Tazuna-san will die if things keep going this way, Sasuke thought as he barely avoided more senba and needles. The princess of Uchiha pulled out some shuriken and hurled them at her adversary. She didn't want to hit, even though she knew it wouldn't happen. Sasuke intended to create a gap for Hinata to attempt an attack. It was successful in an attempt to neutralize the projectiles, The masked nin immediately used some of the needles, but in doing so, he had turned his head away from the Hyuga heiress. Hinata was aware that this was her opportunity. With her hands poised to strike, she lunged at the masked nin as she approached swiftly. The heiress extended her hand, preparing to strike one of the numerous chakra points she had been forced to memorize by her father, but she moved too slowly. A single needle that the masked ninja threw at Hinata became lodged in her torso. Hinata clamped her mouth shut as pain rushed through her body and her eyes closed. Hinata lost her balance because of the pain and No, she regained her balance. Hinata is not going to collapse, she is not going to fail. She was unable to pay for it once again. Hinata Hyuga prepared herself and charged. Confronting the masked nin directly, she made several attempts to hit her opponent in various places. As Hinata persisted in her attack, unshed tears were starting to form every time she had to move to strike. Her torso hurt. The masked nin told Hinata, "My needles are coated with a special chemical that slowly shuts down the body. You should feel its effects shortly. Don't worry, it isn't lethal. I don't plan on killing any of you." As he avoided every blow the heiress threw at him, Hinata did begin to experience the consequences. She began to move more slowly, and her vision became blurry. Her next lunge ended in a stumble as she started to lose her footing. The masked nin had the ideal opportunity to punch her torso because of this. After sending Hinata flying back, he turned to face Sasuke, who was approaching him like a bee. A punch from the Uchiha princess was easily deflected in an attempt to sweep the enemy off his feet. She twisted and protruded her leg. It was easily rendered useless as well. Damn it! As she attempted to hit her opponent more, Sasuke thought in frustration. Hinata was still on the ground when the Uchiha princess looked at her. The sense of deja vu had been there since they had stepped onto the bridge. Sasuke had previously seen this carnage all around her, in bloody fragments. She had seen the people she loved. She thought of her mother, who had just been murdered by him, as she looked at Hinata, who was motionless. Sasuke became agitated and vulnerable as a result. And that assault manifested as a fist striking her abdomen with the wind knocked out of her. She staggered back. Sasuke held her stomach as the pain festered. Gasping for air, she turned to face the masked ninja, who quickly formed hand signals. Sasuke and the masked ninja were surrounded by a condensed, much colder air. Sasuke felt goosebumps from the abrupt drop in temperature, and his body hair stood on end. Secret technique: demonic mirroring ice crystals. Ice mirrors. Sasuke's eyes widened as she thought giant, icy, reflecting rectangles of ice surrounded Sasuke. Sasuke realized there was no way out as they surrounded her. In addition to encircling her, they formed a dome around her, revealing every aspect of Sasuke's body. The air around her was cold, and they had trapped her. As she saw her image reflected onto multiple blocks of ice, it sent chills down her spine. Sasuke had the sudden urge to move aside from something out of instinct. Her body shifted to the left where Sasuke had stood. A great number of needles pierced the earth. All she could see when she looked around were the mirrors. She was fighting with Hinata, but she didn't see the masked nin. Sasuke stiffened, prepared to avoid any needles that might be aimed at her. As Naruto entered the scene, he thought absently, blood. It appeared as though the bridge that was supposed to save the land of Wave had been through hell. Body parts, blood, and water were all over the place. Naruto was unconcerned with the bloodshed that was spread out everywhere, except for the strong metallic stench of the blood, which caused him to wrinkle his nose. He looked around and noticed the two battles going on at the same time. When the blonde Yamanaka saw the sword strapped to Naruto's back, she shook her head and said, "Naruto, where'd you go? Now's not the time, help Sasuke." For a moment, the Vulpine-like genin searched for Sasuke but was unable to locate her. He only saw Kakashi, Zabuza, and Hinata, who was making every effort to get to her feet, and she didn't appear to be present. A huge dome of what appeared to be Arctic rectangles was also visible to him. He became somewhat aware of what was happening, and his eyes widened. In that dome, while avoiding more sword strikes from his bloodthirsty opponent, Zabuza, Kakashi yelled, "Naruto, what are you waiting for? Support Sasuke, now!" When Naruto's sensei attempted to produce more jutsu, Zabuza Momochi's quick cuts kept cutting him off. The blonde straightened the sword that lay, somewhat awkwardly, on his side and nodded. It slowed his movement and chafed his side whenever he moved because he wasn't yet accustomed to it. A hurried sheathing was the cause of Naruto's minor discomfort and unsteadiness because his body was not accustomed to having extra weight on one side. Once again, Naruto's gaze swept across the ice dome of mirrors before he made hand signals and created 3 separate, solid-looking clones. "What do you need, boss?" The 3 identical copies asked in unison as they glanced at one another before turning to the original. "Enter into the dome through different points and help Sasuke, surround her and protect." With a nod, the 3 clones made their way to the dome, prepared to assist Sasuke. Naruto was going to take his place and assist them as well, but he stopped when his gaze strayed to Hinata. The Hyuga heiress was just rising, wincing and panting wildly as she attempted to stand. Her body and hands were trembling, making it difficult for her to stay balanced. She sensed that she had lost a lot of her energy. Her head started spinning abruptly, and she could feel her body descending. A hand caught her and kept her balance, preventing her from hitting the ground. She glanced vaguely at the one who was holding her up at the moment. Naruto-kun, be quiet, and sit down. I don't have the time for the weak. Naruto's statement caused Hinata's eyes to widen when she understood Naruto's meaning. She bowed her head. Naruto doesn't have time for her because he views her as weak. She followed her crush's instructions exactly, and tears began to well up in her eyes. She took a seat and started crying to herself in private. The blonde started to gesture to his clones as he moved toward the ice dome in order to assist Sasuke with the masked nin. The replicas nodded and rushed into the battle alongside Naruto. The first thing Naruto saw were the needles. Then Sasuke's shallow cuts and labored breathing. Naruto and his clones surrounded the Uchiha, each preparing an attack by bringing out their kunai. Poof! Poof! When that attack came, a flurry of needles destroyed the clones with the exception of the clones' respective disappearance. It was comparatively silent and happened faster than a blink of an eye. Only Naruto, Sasuke, and another Naruto clone remained. Poof! Sasuke and Naruto were alone now. They exchanged glances before swerving to the left to avoid the nin's flurry of needles. Hello, Ninja-san, we meet again. Naruto only had to look for a moment to recognize the voice. That boy who looked like a girl was sleeping and picking herbs. He immediately realized that he had the ideal moment to end him, and his hands clenched into fists. If only Naruto had realized that stranger would cause trouble down the road. You, Naruto uttered, his fists getting even more clenched. Before Naruto concentrated on avoiding a barrage of needles aimed at her, Sasuke gave her a curious glance. Yes, me? Then, in one of the ice mirrors, the masked nin appeared, his mask still covering his face and hiding the smile that was growing on his lips. He hurled additional needles at the two. Naruto sidestepped and hurled a kunai at the ninja in the mask. The kunai cut through the ice as it sailed through the air, heading straight for the enemy's forehead and embedding itself in the mirror. But Naruto saw that the ninja had moved into another mirror right before the projectile struck it. The masked ninja said, almost amused, "You're going to have to try harder than that, Ninja-san. As long as there are mirrors I can jump to, you won't be able to strike me." Naruto said, "Looks like I will have to destroy all of them." As he pulled out more kunai and barely avoided being hit by another cluster of senba and needles, he threw two kunai, aiming for two mirrors that were directly next to each other, and the blonde backed up a little after hearing what Naruto was planning. Sasuke followed suit. Unfortunately, some more senba NS made the kunai useless because it missed the intended targets. A gash appeared on Naruto's side as he swore under his breath as a blur rushed past him. He's quick. Naruto's hand immediately went to his wound, attempting to stop the blood loss by applying pressure as he performed hand signals and channeled his chakra. The blonde clenched his teeth. He had not yet perfected this jutsu, so he wasn't sure if he should use it, but he knew that if he didn't use it completely, he and his friends would perish. Fire style. Flame whirlwind. Around Naruto, flames rose from the earth, writhing and hissing in the chilly air like a fiery beast. The Uchiha princess and the blonde were suddenly consumed by the fire, which was tearing at the ice mirrors with flame. The masked nin's eyes grew wide as he noticed that the continuous stream of coiling fire was melting his mirrors. The temperature increased, and he would burn if he did nothing. Naruto yelled at the masked nin and said, "I spent all my free time trying to get this down, never thought I would actually use it this soon." Naruto recalled that he had not yet perfected this jutsu, but he also recalled all of the burns he had sustained during his training. As was often the case with fire, it was extremely unstable. And to the desperation of the two genin, that instability turned out to be a contributing factor as the fires started to subside and go out. When Sasuke saw Naruto, her eyes widened and she lost her ability to speak. How much was this child concealing from the others, and how strong was he? Even she was unable to generate that much flame, and to win the battle by herself. She gave a headshake. All of this was too unbelievable. Looks like that was the best you had to offer. Ninja-san, this was the best you had to offer to protect your fellow ninja, your fry. She isn't my friend, she is only a teammate. The masked nin was stopped in his tracks by this. At first, he intended to use the conversation to divert his annoying adversaries, but this he no longer understood this. But why would you go so far for only a teammate? I thought you wouldn't even risk your life for a friend. Naruto squinted his eyes. Although the abrupt conversation seemed a little out of place, it could just be a ruse to lower their defenses. He tensed up and responded. Why come into the dome? Because my sensei instructed me to. He took out a kunai and grinned. I'm not risking my life, and I will be the one to walk out of this alive. So, you are a tool for your village, Just like I am merely a tool for Zabuza to use and discard, I was abandoned by everyone, left to fend for myself, but Zabuza saved me, and now I am his tool, and only that, just like you are for your village. The difference between us is that I have come to terms with my fate. I am not a tool, I will not be referred to as one, the blonde growled at his adversary, his hands tightening around his kunai. At the mirror the masked ninja was in. The kunai in Naruto's hand sailed through the air with his fist cocked for an explosive hit. Naruto also bounded towards the mirror as soon as the kunai left his grasp. The fire, all the other mirrors were melted by it, and if this one is destroyed, no. This couldn't have been the boy's idea all along, with nothing else to do but face the boy. Naruto's adversary thought he hurled himself in the direction of the blonde from the mirror. Pain blood streaming, fist throbbing, eyes clenched as Naruto soared past his falling opponent, he felt the sensation of falling. Like some prerogative irony, he saw his own face instead of the girlish-looking boy he'd met the day before after the porcelain mask broke into a million pieces. It was only for a moment, though an optical illusion, a sense of connection between two shattered souls who had been cast aside. Both of them stood on opposing sides of the same ideal, despite the fear and malice they had displayed in their brief lives. Naruto gave a harsh grunt but ignored the agony and rose to confront his astonished opponent. Fuck you. You think just because he took you and you owe your life to him? That your life has no meaning without him? Naruto stopped for a moment. You're right, though you and I, despite being both shinobi, are different. While you accept your fate of being tossed aside, I refuse to just sit idly by and be used as others see fit. I can't accept that fate. I will fight for what I deem precious, and not what others declare as such. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I am going to show you just how wrong you are. Very well, Naruto-san. Haku, will now stop going easy on you. Was that going smoothly? As she got ready to draw her kunai from her pouch, Sasuke pondered. Naruto's sharp voice conveyed an anger that Sasuke knew was out of character. Sasuke, this is between me and him, stay out. The icy Naruto who hardly showed emotion was gone, and in its place was a Naruto who exuded anger. Sasuke! Yelled Sakura and Ino. The fact that their friend was okay gave them both relief. The Uchiha realized that her friends could clearly see the fight now that the ice mirrors were gone. She was less likely to follow Naruto's instructions now that her friends could see her. She stiffened, preparing to attack or to repel an attack. You aren't the only one that's got something to prove, Naruto, Sasuke said icily, ignoring the blonde's poisonous glance. She had to be the best. You know now she cannot lose. She refused to let Naruto or Haku defeat her. If she lost to either of them, she would be nothing in comparison to the monster that wiped out her clan and her family. Additionally, she had to demonstrate her strength in front of her friends, who always thought she was the strongest. While maintaining eye contact with his opponent, Haku, Naruto spat at his teammate, saying, "TCH, you're only going to get in my way." His remark caused Sasuke's mouth to tighten and her teeth to grind together. But the fight between the two genin in front of him made Haku laugh. He could take advantage of this. Haku might emerge victorious if he could make them fight for the win. All he had to do was drag things out a bit. The pools of water left over from Kakashi's jutsu shaped into precise duplicates of the formerly masked nin as Haku flashed hand signals. As Naruto fixed his gaze on the four Haku forms, his body stiffened. "Come and get me, ninja-san, that is," Haku said with a slightly smug smile, "if your friend doesn't already get to me first." At the challenge, Naruto grinned a little. At last, he was facing a formidable foe, and this would be his opportunity to give it his all. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as a blur swooped by. Sasuke was charging the Haku-s in that blur. Determined to deny Naruto a chance to win, she got ready to throw her kunai at each of her enemies in the hopes that they would strike and reduce the number of options available to her true enemy. That bit, Naruto's hands automatically threw his kunai in an attempt to deflect Sasuke's before he could finish thinking. Clang! Clang! Two of Sasuke's kunai were knocked down by Naruto's kunai, while Haku's barrage of Senba-en deflected. The other two nine clones materialized, prepared to engage in combat with his adversary, as soon as Naruto heard confirmation of the hit and flashed hand signals. And they fought. Naruto was aware that he might not be able to defeat Haku even if he gave it his all, even going so far as to field test some of the Forbidden Scroll jutsu. He used more clones than were required. Because of this, however, Naruto was beginning to feel a little worn out. By the time his clones were engaged in combat, he was feeling the effects of using a jutsu that he had not mastered in combat. Naruto blinked twice, his eyelids becoming a little heavy, and then charged in to help the clones already engaged in combat with the many Haku incarnations. When the opportunity arose, he made sure to watch Sasuke, who was attempting to get a few kill shots. Fortunately or unfortunately for Sasuke, Haku appeared to be more than capable of avoiding the attacks of both her and Naruto's clones. Even 2 of Naruto's 9 clones could be destroyed by his adversary with skillful stabs using Haku's signature weapon. Poof. 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 The blonde watched his clones begin to fade away, one by one, and his eyes grew wide despite their best efforts. They were unable to match Haku's skill. Naruto gritted his teeth, planted his feet, and was getting ready to use another of the Forbidden Scrolls jutsu. His eyes met Shikamaru's and Ino's just before his hands started the ceremonial motion. Shit. They're observing me. Given that they are watching, I can't go all out. His home, Konoha, remains his enemy. It always will be, and if he were to show his adversary his actual strength, they could either prepare for it or find a way to counter it. Naruto stumbled a little in his thought process, which gave Haku the chance to attack. The blonde had no control over the senba and needles that were encircling him. Before he realized it, his clones were either too far away to serve as meat shields or too preoccupied with battling Haku's clones to assist. Naruto was left with no choice but to launch a full-scale attack. The needles were too fast for him to dodge, and for the same reason, he was unable to perform a defense jutsu. Closing his eyes and waiting for the inevitable was his only option. Naruto was royally screwed. Naruto stood waiting for what felt like the longest moment of his life. He was awaiting the pitiful conclusion of his life. For the underside of his own being, as well as his ideals, objectives, and dreams. He felt strangely conflicted. He felt that it would be a relief to have it all come to an end, even though he most definitely didn't want to die. Hatred and name-calling would cease if it did. In fact, he would never have experienced such abuse if his life had ended when he truly wanted it to. The arduous training and hopeful success of becoming a ninja would never have happened to him. He would never have put an end to Mizuki's life. At that, Naruto grinned a little. The irony is that the village still views him as the bad guy, even though he was the one who put an end to Mizuki and saved the community. Naruto hesitated. This was far too long. He ought to have passed away by now. Almost quizzically, he opened his eyes to see why it was taking so long. His pupil dilated, and his eyes grew larger. In front of him was Sasuke, who had needles in her body. He was saved by her. Sasuke coughed. Why are you still standing there, idiot? Even though she was ragged and covered in blood, she managed to endure the excruciating pain of the needles with a sense of superiority. Her breath was as ragged as it could be, and she was stooped over. She is barely conscious, as Naruto could see. Ino and Sakura, who were still keeping watch over Tazuna, let out gasps and yelled in shock. Still sitting where she had fallen in battle earlier, Hinata was shielding her eyes from the pain her comrade was experiencing. Naruto didn't get a bonus. He was unable to understand why Sasuke Uchiha would risk her life to save him. He most definitely wouldn't have treated her in the same way, since that's how ninjas operate. He would have allowed her to perish. A ninja must be cold and emotionless. Only his professional colleagues are in his cell. The only purposes of a ninja's teammates are as distractions or meat shields. It appeared that Sasuke had a different definition of what a team member was than he did. Why? Naruto's eyes were still on the Uchiha heiress's wounded body when he blurted out the question. There was a hint of emotion in the question, along with a strong desire to find out. Almost letting out a cry of pain, Sasuke clenched her jaw and said, "Listen to Kakashi's sensei. Didn't you?" When Kakashi-sensei and their team practiced, the blonde's fists clenched because he was a member of the Tima. Her Tima, she shielded him. Ha ha ha, and you can't even bring yourself to return the favor. Time stopped for Naruto, and he clenched his jaw. He was aware that it would eventually surface. Naruto was aware that the demon was unable to avoid getting involved in his life. Shut it, you damn fox, he muttered to himself. Naruto closed his eyes and bent his head. At that moment, Sasuke's body failed her and she fell to the ground. Why should I stay quiet? It wasn't me that couldn't protect your teammates. It wasn't me that was too weak to handle Haku alone. Now look at you. You have caused the death of the only one who could understand you. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in his familiar, gloomy, and melancholy mindscape rather than standing on the bridge. I said shut up. He growled. He was up against the creature that resided within the gates, imprisoned inside Naruto without his consent. The silence was finally broken by laughter, but it wasn't Naruto's, as he stared down the fox demon. Are you angry? Do you feel angry, weak, defeated? Does it make you feel angry that you were the sole reason of her death? Or, the fox stopped and mocked him, are you angry that you couldn't have saved her? What does it matter to you? Naruto responded with rage, you are just an animal stuck in a cage. You don't care about me. All you care about is finding a way to get free to destroy everything. Before speaking, the Kyuubi stared at him for a long moment. You were incredibly weak, Brad. If I were at full power, a mere bat of my eyelash would have killed you, and your family. Do not talk to me with such disrespect. I am the one that has the power. You are nothing without me. I made you who you are now. At the beast, Naruto's eyes narrowed fiercely, as though his veins burst and his heart grew colder at the mere mention of his family. He felt the immense killing intent emanating from the fox as he clenched his fists until they hurt. Naruto didn't like being put in his place, even though he knew that he had no chance in hell of opposing it at his current level. Now, hopefully you see why you need to release me. Your stubbornness on that matter has gotten a very important ally into danger. Let me out, Naruto, and I can destroy everything that you hate with me out. No one will hurt you again, and you wouldn't be to blame for my actions. No, that was the end of it. Naruto won't let the fox go free just so it can fulfill his lifelong ambition. He desired to be the one to put an end to the village that mistreated, shunned, and abandoned him. The desire to see it happen through his own actions was burning in his eyes, and he wasn't going to allow a demon to ruin the dreamlike satisfaction that comes from accomplishing a goal. In addition, he will require the fox to be trapped. Naruto has been trying to control the Kyuubi ever since he first met it. One day, he hoped he would be able to take the demon's abilities and make them his own. However, Naruto was aware that he might not be able to keep the Kyuubi under control. The second best course of action, if Naruto was unable to control it, was to stop it from being released into the world. The fox gave the blonde a furious look as if it wanted to crush it. Suddenly, a growl came out of the demon's lips, and Naruto felt a slight rumble. Naruto felt the energy it generated push against him as it reverberated. You little do you know what I can accomplish? The people I can obliterate? You are just a single-minded, ignorant brat, you do? Angry at the demon inside of him, Naruto interrupted. Are you going to talk all day, or are you actually going to help me? The blonde knew he had the power over it, even though he was afraid of it since he could control it to do anything he wanted. He might be able to defeat any opponent in his way if he could use its chakra. The Kyuubi snorted at him and said, "Humph, why should I help you?" Naruto gave the Kyuubi a look. It understood why it was supposed to assist him. For now, their lives are intertwined. Naruto closed his eyes without waiting for the fox to confirm anything. He waited for a while before opening them, curious to see what would be inside. He opened his eyes, which were red instead of their usual blue, and took a deep breath, bracing himself for anything. A little before 000 Kakashi was still struggling to hit Zabuza. He tried a few diversionary strategies while simultaneously approaching for the kill because he initially believed that the element of surprise would catch him off guard. He went all out with his jutsu after being stopped at his. He attempted to even. He called for his dogs to circle and flank him, but Zabuza's demonstration that he was more than capable of managing nin dogs negated his plans. Zabuza said menacingly, "Out of party tricks, Kakashi?" as he swung his cleaver-like sword at him and threw a kunai in the spot. He made Kakashi dodge. "No," he said, slapping the airborne kunai away from him with a blue light-enveloped hand. "I still have some surprises." A smile came through his mask as he regained his bearings before launching his counterattack. 3 clones appeared when Kakashi made hand gestures. As his clones dispersed, searching for any gaps in Zabuza's defense, the original Kakashi remarked, "Since you were kind enough to use clones, I thought I would return the favor." Zabuza, however, wasn't the type to passively allow him to gain an advantage. As he evaluated how he should proceed with his attack, he rushed one of the clones and quickly kicked him out. He might attack the original, but there's no assurance that the clones won't harm him since the clones can be removed with less effort. They are by definition inferior to the original, but the original could still injure him. Decisions Zabuza also needed to make them quickly. Zabuza swung his sword down on one of the remaining clones as they charged at him, certain that it had struck, but it didn't. The clone sidestepped, leaving his sword, which resembled a cleaver, buried in the ground. It was a minor inconvenience, a minor setback. The only thing Zabuza had to do was extract it. He was about to do just that when the other clone kicked him in the upper back. Attacking from behind, Zabuza had to decide whether to temporarily drop his sword or risk suffering some sort of spinal cord injury. The original clone grabbed the sword and smiled. As soon as Zabuza's hand released to defend himself, he muttered something under his breath so Zabuza couldn't hear him, and he flashed hand signals. Zabuza grabbed his sword and pulled, but it was still buried in the ground when he deflected the kick and the second clone launched back to keep him from vanishing. After a brief pause, he placed his other hand on the sword for added support and pulled once more. But this time the stonework held his sword in place. As Zabuza looked, he saw paper with ninja symbols on it. Suddenly, he felt something snake around his arms. "This is what we call binds, Zabuza. They are a special ninja tool pretty much exclusive to the leaf. You were stuck here, with no way to move. Damn it." Gazing down at his snagged arm and weapon, Zabuza attempted to pry it from the earth once more. Poof. Poof. After the clones vanished, Kakashi appeared in front of Zabuza. "When you let go of your sword, I had my clone put an adhesive jutsu on it, making it stick into the stonework. It will take a lot more than you to remove it. There is no use, except your fate." The familiar static returned as Kakashi aimed his palms down at the ground. Once more the air became acrid, and everyone in the vicinity could smell a strong ozone odor. This is the end, Lightning Blade. With his hand buzzing and encircled by lightning chakra, Kakashi lunged towards the stranded man. He was on the verge of hitting his target when he sensed an odd sensation. Not only was it chakra, but it was also dreadfully familiar. Kakashi experienced an amazing chakra pulse from the Kyuubi at that precise moment. His carefully aimed attack veered slightly off course as his eyes widened and his head tilted slightly toward the source. It injured Zabuza rather than killing him. He was seriously injured, and he would undoubtedly perish if he didn't receive medical care. Naruto was pleased. He looked with his crimson eyes and felt strong. He gave him a menacing smirk while flexing his muscles with the rush of power coursing through him. He knew something was different. He saw that his teeth were sharpened and that his nails were longer. But he felt in command. Did he gain control of the fox's chakra by accepting it? That thought caused Naruto's eyes to narrow slightly. He never felt that way, so it must have thus him. Ha 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 ha, chuckled Naruto. He chuckled at how happy he was and how terrified everyone else was. He could sense their trembling and their hair standing on end due to the abrupt release and acceptance of the fox's chakra. So yes, he could feel their fear. Kakashi was afraid. Haku did the same. Then the cloak appeared. Naruto's features grew more savage as orange chakra surrounded him. His muscles bulged further, and his eyes sharpened once more. His whiskers darkened, and his mouth took on the appearance of a predatory dog's. His animal transformation was complete except for the absence of a tail. Naruto stood there, a threatening monster, scowling at his victim, Haku. Then all of a sudden he was gone. Naruto disappeared in an instant. He suddenly materialized in front of Haku. Grinning, he lifted his hand, palm up, and used his long nails to scratch Haku's face. Haku's left cheek developed 3 scratches that resembled Naruto's whisker marks. After that, Naruto did nothing more. This was what he needed to stretch his legs. He desired to participate even though he was sure he could. He didn't want to end Haku so soon because he wanted to see this chakra's full potential. At that moment, he sensed it. It was so hot that it seemed to be bubbling off his skin. Naruto gazed down at his arms as his red eyes grew wide. He was shocked to discover that they were actually bubbling. It was painful. It was really painful. Naruto believed he could handle more. Naruto cut his arm in an effort to stop it, thinking that the cut would allow the air to escape from the bubbling skin. But Naruto only revealed the reality of what was taking place. His skin was completely black underneath. All of a sudden, his skin burned and his body began to heat up. The others were unable to see what was happening because of the wind and darkness that surrounded Naruto. Kakashi was the only one with even the slightest hint, and he was still paralyzed with terror as he recalled the village's devastation years prior and the sacrifice his sensei had made. Both Naruto's skin and his clothing caught fire. All of it was soon destroyed by fire, leaving behind a completely black humanoid that wasn't particularly human-shaped. It had a single tail and ears like a fox. With a powerful yell, the entity that was Naruto got ready to murder Haku. Haku was frozen in place, trembling in terror at the creature before him. At last, he collected his thoughts in a desperate attempt to get away. He flashed his hand signals as fast as he could, and the familiar mist fell on the bridge, providing Haku with the cover he needed to reach Zabuza and freeze the ground around his sword. Zabuza was bound to the ground, but Haku was able to free him by using it to break the piece of ground. Kakashi barely recognized Haku when they vanished from the bridge because he was busily getting ready for the possibility that he would have to face Naruto. But the monster was still growling and gnawing his black teeth before his eyes had fully acclimated to the mist. His prey had vanished. How unfortunate. When Naruto changed, the monster roared up and saw that the sword had survived the fire that was his body. He removed it and examined it with interest. It was the fox's chakra that controlled Naruto's body. It was the source of pure bestial energy, and it was winning the battle for control of the body. Naruto could only observe. When the fog dissipated, everyone could see the black monster. Tazuna fainted, and Ino and the other genin gasped. Naruto's demon head twisted in response to the sounds of weapons being dropped and gasps, "What the hell?" Kakashi saw that Gato was in the lead of the bandits. Bandits were hired by Gato. When the bandits noticed the monster on the bridge, they became tense. As soon as he saw the group, the monster who had been Naruto recognized them. They were the prey. He had the ability to hunt and kill them. He turned to face them while brandishing Naruto's sword, and a smile appeared on his lips. The black beast rushed the group before anyone could even consider running. As the black shape darted among the group, chopping people in half, mutilating others, and gutting others, blood was flying everywhere. This was beyond words. If Zabuza's actions constituted a massacre, and all of it was visible to the genin. However, they were unable to cope. Shikamaru turned away, muttering to himself as Ino screamed and shielded her eyes. Sakura exhibited catatonia. However, Hinata was unable to look away from it. Naruto-kun. When Hinata saw this monster murdering the bandits, she thought she was aware her bloodline had allowed her to see what others could not. This was Naruto, and she knew it. She was unable to comprehend the power he now possessed and was unsure of whether she should be appalled or enthralled by Naruto's transformation. Hinata was aware. Kakashi was also aware he was aware of it, and it was his duty to ensure that neither Kurenai's nor his students did. If that thing ever changed back to Naruto, he had to make sure they didn't witness it. Thus, Kakashi approached the Genin group and gave them a silent neck jab, rendering them unconscious. Hinata was the last person he knocked out, and based on the look she gave him, she recognized Naruto. After completing his tasks to safeguard the Leaf's secrets, he turned to face the challenge of interacting with Naruto. The monster was still using Naruto's sword to mutilate them. The creature was merely a blur, with only the humanoid fox's shape distinguishable. Mommy. Mommy. Sakura stirred when she felt a slight tug on her clothing. Come on, Mommy. Daddy bought us a puppy. The woman with the pink hair opened her eyes and gazed up at the ceiling. She knew it was safe and familiar, even though it was just plain white. Mommy, please. Sakura turned to face the voice's originator, an 8-year-old girl with pink hair and blue eyes, who was expressing her childish annoyance at her unsuccessful attempts to wake her mother. Sakura stood up, took the child's hand, and gave it a brief caress before turning to face her. She touched the child every day to show her love, which she loved more than anything else in the world. But the child did not carry on the tender moment. She pulled her mother's hand impatiently, signaling again that she must follow. The child led the mother to the lovely living room after leaving Sakura's room and entering a hallway with picture frames lining its walls. The window provided the ideal amount of light to highlight the stunning walls and the spotless positioning of the picture frames. Mom is up. A voice other than her daughter's called out. Sakura turned and saw 2 young, blonde boys, perhaps 11 years old, coming from what she believed to be the kitchen door. After giving Sakura a smile, the 2 boys rushed to give her a hug. The 3 of them began talking anxiously about the new pet they were going to get as soon as they released their grip. Sakura started to consider the trouble this pet would cause as the young girl anxiously began to wrinkle the hem of her orange skirt in anticipation. Naturally, she would be the one to walk it, clean up after it, and teach it to follow basic instructions. All in a day's work for the obedient wife and mother Sakura. Sakura waited for approximately 5 minutes before the door's locks started to turn, signaling that her husband had come and was ready to open it. As the door opened and an older, more attractive, and more masculine version of Uzumaki Naruto emerged, a little gust of air blew into the house. Honey, I'm home. Her loved one gave her the traditional shout of recognition. As the kids held their breath, a tiny black blur darted into the house, yipping and attempting to lick every exposed area of the kids' bodies with its tiny pink tongue. His name is Kuro, Naruto said, pleased that he could give his extremely loving family such a loving pet. However, Sakura tightened her lips, making them resemble the thin line of disapproval worn by most women married into the Nara clan. Kuro was a fox, not a puppy. It was a black fox, in fact. The scene darkened and the air grew cold, as though her thoughts controlled the mood. Honey, what's wrong? Don't you like our new member of the family? Naruto inquired, observing Sakura's expression with concern. When the fox flashed in Naruto's direction, Sakura's gaze was fixed on it, still licking her kids. Mommy, help! The pink-haired ex-shinobi was alerted to the fox by her young's cries. However, it had lost its cuteness. Kuro, the hyper and adorable fox, was transforming into a humanoid, gnashing-toothed black mass of energy. One of the boys was ripped in 2, blood splattering everywhere, and only one tail was left, swirling in the air. The enormous humanoid shape was horribly recognizable. Sakura was horrified by its black hue, realizing that the black fox demon had already murdered one of her children and was now pursuing the other 2. Despite her best efforts to move, she was immobile, like a statue. Despite her desire to save her beloved children, her fear took over and kept her firmly in place. The scene changed again, and tears began to well up. She was by herself on a bridge. She was surrounded by the dead, though, so she wasn't entirely alone. There were piles upon piles of bodies or parts of them all over the place. The stonework was stained with dried blood, which looked too realistically gory. There seemed to be no end to wandering among the corpses. Grr! The growling appeared to have come directly behind Sakura, so she quickly turned around. And there it was, the demon that must have killed all of these people, the same demon that had killed her children. Sakura turned and began to run as it charged at her. As she stumbled over the mangled heaps of flesh, she could feel it closing in on her. The breath on the back of her neck was palpable. Sakura dared not look over her shoulder when Sakura abruptly jumped out of bed. Her bed was soaked with perspiration. She looked around her cautiously, looking for anything unusual. The clock caught her attention. She should not have woken up 2 hours earlier. Sakura stumbled into the hall to get new sheets and a new blanket while wiping the sleep from her eyes in an effort to avoid waking her parents. She moved around her home cautiously and silently. She decided to grab breakfast while she was up and tiptoed back to her bedroom with some fresh bedding. She went into the kitchen, avoiding the mirror, and made it her mission to get some cereal. She opened the cabinets, but when she couldn't find what she was looking for, she scowled a little. "I believe Mom placed some in the pantry." Sakura let out a frustrated sigh and cautiously walked around her kitchen counter to the pantry door without touching anything. She paused as she stood in front of it, then reached out and slid the door open. She stiffened her arms a little, ready for any unexpected assaults. She found her cereal and was about to shut the door after her eyes adapted to the dim light she turned on to see in the pantry when KSSSHHHHHH. The contents of several spice jars spilled all over the floor after they fell and broke. Sakura screamed, "Damn!" and heard footsteps beginning to descend the stairs toward the kitchen. When the kitchen lights came on, the Sakura's father and mother were standing in the doorway, dressed only in their pajamas. "Sakura," the mother said, putting away the broom she had just picked up with a little relief. The father asked sharply, "Do you know what time it is, young lady?" as he questioned why his daughter was awake at 3 in the morning. In the hopes that they wouldn't notice the embarrassing pink tint on her face, Sakura lowered her head. How was she going to confront her parents? How could she explain to them that she had lost hours of sleep on her mission to the wave? She was aware of their reaction if she had been honest with them. If Sakura's parents found out, she would no longer be a ninja or Princess 4. Sakura moved aside to reveal the source of the sound that had been echoing through the house just a few moments earlier. "I'm fine. I just wanted to get something to eat," and suddenly, she said. The parents didn't need Sakura to explain the situation to them because it was clear to them. They quickly grabbed the dustpan and broom while Sakura's father inspected the pantry and ensured he had enough cash from his merchant stands to cover the semi-expensive, soiled spices. Sakura's mother swept the glass. Sakura's parents sent her back to bed after that early morning incident. Before shutting the door, Sakura checked to make sure the room was exactly as she had left it. Sakura walked to her bed and decided to try to sleep after reassuring herself that everything was all right. But she knew she wouldn't be able to. Once she lay down, there was too much for her to contemplate. She was frightened by that. In order to avoid thinking about the recent events, Sakura avoided thinking. Since returning to Konoha 2 days earlier, she had mostly occupied herself with personal activities. Sakura wanted to avoid thinking about the fact that she had killed her first person. She reflected on the experience of killing on her first actual mission as her face went pale as she finally gave in to the inevitable. She didn't intend to kill that man. It was an accident. She didn't intend to use a few shuriken and kunai to destroy his very existence. Reliving that moment in her life caused the pink-haired girl's body to tremble. Death's speed and the terrible realization that followed didn't fully sink in until now. She had no idea it could be so simple, so it was both odd and frightening. It wasn't as difficult as she had thought it would be to make her first kill. Sakura was afraid because it was so simple for her. She didn't want it to be that simple, so it frightened her. The life she had taken was haunting her with nightmares, and she was unable to return it. As Sakura shivered uncontrollably every time she thought of that beast that stalked her in the enormous grave of bodies, she thought, but last night's dream wasn't about that. Staring at the clock on her bedside drawer, she shifted to the opposite side of the bed. It hadn't even been 5 minutes since her parents had led her into her room when Sakura's face fell when she saw the clock. Sakura attempted to sleep again, in vain, but it was ultimately ineffective. When the Junin returned and reported in for debriefing, the third Hokage asked Kakashi, "You are certain of what you saw?" The Hokage, facing a window with a pleasant view of Konoha, smoked his pipe and exhaled a long-drawn puff of smoke as his voice was full of intense concern. Kakashi began solemnly, "Naruto had used the Kyuubi's power, there was no mistaking it." Kakashi remembered the carnage of bandits that followed that black figure on the bridge. Kakashi had underestimated Naruto's speed, and in a moment that would have impressed even the most seasoned ninja, Naruto had killed them all with his eyes swimming in the smoke. The Hokage took another drag and exhaled. The third Hokage asked, observing the children playing joyfully outside without realizing the perilous world they were living in, "How did Naruto return back to normal?" The kids were having a good time playing kickball and were giggling when one of them hit a home run. It seems that Naruto's body can't handle the transformation for an extended period of time after he was done with the bandits. The chakra disappeared and Naruto was left unconscious. "And does he remember anything?" Kakashi replied, "He claims to have forgotten everything," while third Hokage continued to watch the kids outside. "He claims?" the Hokage inquired, raising one of his aged, gray eyebrows as he eventually turned to face the white-haired Junin. Yes, Hokage-sama, replied Kakashi, I don't know for certain, but I think that he is lying, call it a hunch. And you think we should find out? The Hokage said after taking another drag from his pipe. Yes, Inochi could probe his mind for the truth, however, if he doesn't know, he will after the procedure. With a sigh, the Hokage turned back to the kids and stood for a while, watching their innocent play. The elderly man said, Kakashi, will you stand beside me for a moment? Raising an eyebrow, Kakashi followed instructions and stepped forward to stand beside the village chief. The white-haired nin was asked by the Hokage, why do you think people become shinobi, Kakashi? The elderly man folded his hands behind his back and looked thoughtfully at the kids, who were still playing games and riding horses just now. One of the kids, the only girl in the group, ran and scored for her team. There was silence for a while before returning his attention to the kids. Sarutobi glanced at Kakashi, who was still considering the question. Kakashi responded, to ensure the safety of the people, his gaze falling on the side of the Hokage's face as the elderly man observed the kids playing. When Sarutobi said, look at the kids down there, Kakashi's gaze shifted to the group of kids who had just finished playing kickball and begun playing ninja. People become ninja, said Sarutobi, to protect the innocence of the innocent we give our lives so that the children might have the years to play games and laugh. Naruto, while he might be a ninja, is still a child. After giving Kakashi a thoughtful glance, the Hokage moved on. Maybe I am being a senile old man, but I still want to protect Naruto's innocence. Naruto, as you know, doesn't have much to call his own, and I don't want to have another thing ripped away from him if he says he doesn't remember it. I do not wish him to have to. I understand, but, the Sandaime said, turning his head away from the kids and speaking to Kakashi. The news really bothers me if it's true. Naruto's seal may have been broken, which means that he will soon transform once more and lose control. We can't risk the village that way. What can we do? Hokage-sama, there is a priestess in the land of demons that is skilled in sealing and can restore the seal that binds the Kyuubi to Naruto. Unfortunately, this priestess refuses to leave the land. She stands guard over a sealed demon named Morio, who was sealed away years ago. I see, replied Kakashi, it is your wish for me to bring Naruto to the land of demons so that he may have the seal restored. Exactly, but Naruto must not know. If Naruto truly doesn't remember the events on the bridge, then he might not know that the seal has been loosened. I do not wish for him to find it out and try to take advantage of the power that lay dormant inside him. The Kyuubi's chakra is so potent that it corrupts absolutely. If Naruto uses it frequently, it may eventually lead to the Kyuubi permanently possessing him. The Hokage sighed. Kakashi bent his knee and asked, when should Cell 7 depart? Sarutobi responded, putting his pipe to his lips for another drag. Cell 7 shall not? Kakashi's eyes widened as the Hokage explained. Naruto's team members must not find out about the Kyuubi and the mission long ago. I forbade the parents to discuss about the Kyuubi to their children, so the children do not know the truth about Naruto. Imagine, if his team members had realized it was Naruto on the bridge, do you think they would accept him as a team member, or even a friend? Knowing the answer, Kakashi remained silent. They will reject him, and wonder whether or not he is safe. They will spend their time with the boy, paranoid about him and wondering if that black shape will kill them whenever Naruto goes into battle with them. That is not the life I wish for Naruto. The Hokage inhaled and exhaled smoke. You mentioned that Hyuga Hinata knows about Naruto's transformation. No doubt due to her Byakugan. I was thinking about having her mind wiped, the elderly Hokage stated between inhalations, but it might be good that she knows. She could tell if Naruto is utilizing the Kyuubi's chakra. Kakashi straightened and rose to his feet, addressing the elderly Konoha leader with dignity. I will send Cell 10, along with you and Naruto, on a diplomatic mission to the land of demons. You will be filling in for Kurenai, as she is still weak due to her altercation on the land of waves. The medic nins are working feverishly to get the chakra poison out of her system. Kakashi gave him a concerned look. The Hokage hastily reassured Kakashi, it's not lethal anymore, I assure you, to allay his fears. However, only you and I will know the true objective of this mission, and that's the way it stays. If we are fortunate, we might gain a very strong ally as well as deal with Naruto. Hokage-sama, Kakashi started, Cell 10 holds Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino, and Hyuga Hinata. All three of them are friends of Uchiha Sasuke. Surely, a mission like this might allow them to find out about Naruto's. Kakashi stopped and searched for the correct word. A condition, and you know how friends are. Word is bound to find its way to Sasuke. Won't that undermine what you were hoping to accomplish? If that's the case, surely it would be wiser to just let Sasuke come with us. She is a Uchiha, and with her Sharingan it might be possible to pacify Naruto. When the Hokage said, you are referring to the last time the fox attacked the village, Kakashi nodded. The elderly gentleman stopped and said, "What happened back then is still a secret. Not many people know that the nine-tailed fox was being controlled by a Sharingan user. It is a secret that I have kept. For fear that villagers would treat the last remaining survivor of the clan with suspicion or outright hatred, I have managed to spare Sasuke. But my attempts to achieve the same thing with Naruto were a failure." The elderly man let out a sigh as his aged eyes transported him back in time. "I saw it all," Kakashi retorted, "but I tried to stop him." Kakashi trailed off, and as both men's thoughts were brought back to that fateful night, the room appeared to grow darker. The white-haired nin's mind flashed to a red Sharingan. Glaring menacingly at Kakashi, the old Hokage recalled what his successor had given up. He recalled the proud expression on the third Hokage's student Jiraiya's face when his student assumed the position of Konoha leader, and the fourth Hokage's smile when the young man got married. He cried when he recalled seeing the young leader's body lying motionless next to his wife, Kushina, who had also died. He also recalled their son's frantic cries, as he was the only family member still alive. When the silence was finally broken, the third Hokage said, "It is true that Sharingan users can control tailed beasts, but if it were that easy, you could do it after all. You do possess one. As you know, I wasn't born with it. The man that attacked the village 12 years ago spoke like a true Uchiha." Kakashi's hand moved up to his headband and pulled it up, revealing the red eye that stared at the old man in an odd way. "That is correct, Hokage-sama, Buddha." Sarutobi completed the thought by asking, "And so you think that only a true Uchiha could be able to control the tailed beasts?" The elderly man sighed once more as Kakashi Hitaki nodded. "The secrets of the Sharingan are much more complicated than that, Kakashi. The Uchiha clan were very secretive about their bloodline limit, even within their own ranks. Only the best of the Uchiha knew their full capabilities, and they were all wiped out." The Hokage's stare turned cold as he remembered the events that led to the massacre and the child who survived that. "I don't know the full extent either. All I do know was that the man that controlled the Kyuubi did not possess a normal Sharingan, but a much more powerful version, called the Mangekyo Sharingan. With this Mangekyo Sharingan, he seemed to have possessed the power to control the Kyuubi to destroy the village." The red eye flashed into Kakashi's memory once more, and there was another punctuated silence as he processed what had just been told. Kakashi's face drooped a little and his hands tightened. "Uchiha Sasuke does not, it seems, possess the Mangekyo Sharingan, and neither do you," Sarutobi said. "Both of you would be unable to control the tailed beast. The best you could do is to subdue it using force, and for that, I would rather not risk the last Uchiha's life. Her Kekai Genkai is much too valuable to be lost, and if she goes up against the Kyuubi, she will die." "Hokage-sama, if I may speak freely," Kakashi started, and the old man nodded, the pipe in his mouth. "The moment she and Naruto became shinobi, they forfeited the right to their innocence." "I know," Kakashi said, nodding toward the children outside the window, who were finally heading home as night fell, "that you wish to protect them, but the life of a ninja already works against your attempts. On the mission, the girls on Cell 10 had killed a man, and the moment the kunai left their hands, their innocence was shattered. That is the sacrifice we ninja must make, because in order to protect the innocence of the innocents, we must destroy our own innocence. There is no reason to protect them, Lord Hokage," Kakashi continued, closely observing his leader. "They wanted to live the life of a ninja. To protect them from that would be to deny them their will." As he released another puff of smoke, the Hokage gave Kakashi a thoughtful glance while he thought about what he had said. After that, Sarutobi turned around and took one last glance out the window, where the kids had been. "You may very well be right, Kakashi, but with Naruto," the Hokage sighed at the mention of the blonde's name. "I can't help but be protective of him. We know of the pain and sorrow that a Jinchuriki might feel, but we can't fully comprehend it. We may never know how much we have failed him. You can see this in his eyes, whenever he looks at you." Kakashi nodded, but the Hokage didn't notice because his gaze was fixed on a lone swing set swinging gently in the wind by the Hokage mansion. "However, I still remember how happy young Naruto was when he was under my personal protection. I visited him every day," the Hokage said with a sorrowful smile, "and I remember with great fondness how precocious he was, much like his mother when she was younger." Instead of the swing set, Sarutobi's gaze was fixed on a happy blonde who was keen to learn about ninja. 5-year-old blonde Uzumaki, Naruto exclaimed, "Grandpa, Grandpa," as he walked at a trot toward the village chief. As the young child embraced Sarutobi, tiny arms encircled his lower body. The elderly man affectionately patted his blonde head and drew him away so he could have a clear view of the boy. Sarutobi inquired, "How have you been today, Naruto?" This was a common topic of discussion between them. This was the beginning of every visit from Hiruzen Sarutobi to the child. But the old man never voiced any complaints. He averted his gaze from the boy to examine the apartment. It was unsettling to look at its empty walls, which gave the impression that no one lived there. The place was devoid of life. For a brief moment, Naruto's face looked down, but then, almost as fast as it had vanished, the boy's broad smile reappeared, though it was noticeably blander than before. When the Hokage saw this, he scowled a little. What was the expression on Naruto's face? The Hokage smiled and said, "Ah, I just remembered, I got you a gift." The old man produced a book and held it up to Naruto, who had a puzzled expression in his blue eyes. "Thea." Naruto began reading the title, faltering slightly at the words, "The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi." "That's right," Sarutobi said, still grinning as he observed the blonde's expression, which was as genuine as it could be. In awe, he went over to sit on the 5-year-old's bed and gestured for the boy to follow following instructions. The boy sat down beside the third Hokage, his legs swinging off the side of the bed. When Naruto looked up at the elderly man, he noticed that the Hokage had turned to the child after glancing at the book with cloudy eyes. The Hokage looked at the 5-year-old and said, "Naruto, would you like me to read to you?" "Oh," cried Naruto, "would you, grandfather? That would be wonderful." After clearing his throat, Sarutobi read, "The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi," which said, there were many shinobi villages that had existed around Mount Hyakki, but only one housed the utterly gutsy ninja, Naruto. The elderly man smiled thoughtfully and returned his attention to the book, stroking it affectionately before opening the cover. "His name is Naruto?" the boy said, his eyes widening as he heard his name. Recalling vividly how that coincidence occurred, Sarutobi grinned at the boy and said, "Indeed, it was." With joyous leg swings, Naruto pressed, "Was he a strong ninja, Grandpa?" "He was," replied the Hokage. "His goal is to bring peace to the world. In order to achieve that, he would have to be very strong." "Wow," Naruto mouthed, enthralled with this ninja warrior's legend. Sarutobi continued to read, recounting the many of Naruto's accomplishments throughout the book while observing Uzumaki Naruto's face as he was enthralled with them. He discussed the deaths, the battles that Naruto, the father of the utterly gutsy shinobi, had gotten himself involved in, and how Naruto himself had lost his life in the pursuit of peace. The Hokage discovered a good place to stop as the sun passed across the window over time, creating a vibrant array of hues when it finally joined the horizon. After Sarutobi closed the book, Naruto said, "Grandpa, can I become that strong?" The child turned to face the elderly Hokage, and the child's blue eyes returned the gaze. "Yes, I think that you can if you work hard. You will become strong enough to protect the ones you love, and gain acceptance from those that don't love you." This was true, except in the case of Naruto's cell, the elderly Hokage remarked, still gazing out the window. When Naruto and the other new genin found out their cell selections, they were told that they were made based on team balance. That statement caused Kakashi's eyes to widen. He had no idea of this when the Hokage had given him the 3-man team. He gave Sarutobi, who was standing smoking his pipe, a questioning glance. The excuse still applied, considering that Naruto was the worst in his class on paper and Sasuke was the best, but that wasn't the real reason they had been put together, Sarutobi said. Uchiha Sasuke knows what it's like to be alone, much like Naruto. She's been alone the majority of her life, and can relate to the sorrow that Naruto feels inside. This is why I made sure that they were put together, because the pain they both share allows them to understand each other, and that understanding could lead to friendship. If I send Uchiha Sasuke along with the both of you, that goal of friendship becomes threatened, and Naruto could end up being truly alone. However, if I send the others, I can still give Naruto the chance he so desperately needs. The Hokage stopped and looked back at Kakashi. There isn't anyone more frightening than a shinobi who has nothing. Kakashi understood the Hokage and nodded over his Sharingan. He lowered his headband and, "When will we depart?" "You will have a week before you are to be called back here to receive the official mission request. I must send word to the land of demons and let Moroku know of this. Until then, I wish for you to keep an eye on Naruto." Kakashi, while I do not want him to be mentally probed, I do think it wise to keep tabs on the boy. If he does remember, there will be no doubt that he will try to train with the Kyuubi's chakra. After saying, "Yes, sir," Kakashi disappeared, leaving the elderly Hokage to reflect on the future while gazing out at the sunset. Hyuga Hinata woke up from a nightmare. The violet-haired heiress to the Hyuga bloodline wiped the perspiration from her forehead and recalled the nightmare. As she recalled the massive back mass of bestial chakra that radiated from Naruto in her dream, her clammy hands tightly gripped her blankets. She felt stuck to the ground as Naruto stalked her with a bloodstained sword, his red eyes penetrating her soul. She had woken up, her heart still pounding rapidly, just as he had raised the sword to kill her ruthlessly. As she looked around, she thought, Na Naruto. A room with formal furniture and other exquisite decorations was illuminated by sunlight streaming through well-known windows. When she looked at the dresser across from her futon, she was greeted by a picture of a young Hinata and her sister, Hyuga Hanabi, standing next to each other, both of them smiling. She was in the Hyuga complex, in her room before getting up to prepare for another day as a kunoichi. The shy girl calmed herself and relaxed. After putting on her training attire, Hinata headed to the courtyard to start her daily training session with Hanabi and her father. Hyuga Hiyashi. The typical morning proceeded in this manner, but upon arriving at the courtyard, she noticed Kakashi standing beside Hiyashi and Hanabi. Kakashi greeted the young Hyuga with a "yo," raising his hand. The young genin froze, her thoughts racing as she pondered why the Cell 17 leader was at her home. Hinata, Hiyashi, her dad, replied, "Kakashi wishes to speak to you. It apparently concerns the events that occurred on your last mission." Hinata glanced at Kakashi with her light gray eyes, and he gave her a pleasant nod. Was the mission to the wave the subject of this? Hinata was immediately brought back to the bridge massacre and the way Kakashi knocked out her friends before coming back to attack her. She took a small step back and glanced anxiously between her father and Kakashi. Not knowing quite what to do at last, Hinata gave a nod and moved in the direction of Kakashi, who continued to have a friendly appearance. "Well, as you may have guessed, this is a private affair. May I please be alone with her?" the white-haired Junin said, turning to Hinata's father. With a nod, Hiyashi told Hanabi to follow him inside. When they did, the door had already been closed and Kakashi and Hinata were the only people standing in the Hyuga complex's central courtyard. They both stood and watched each other for a moment in silence. Kakashi gave her a hopeful glance. Hinata began, what do we need to talk about?" Kakashi's amiable face vanished. "I need to talk to you about what you remember happening on the bridge." Hinata started nervously, "I don't but Kakashi interrupted her before she could say anything more. In an attempt to reassure the girl, Kakashi said, "There's no need to lie, I know you know." Ever since Hinata had regained consciousness after being rendered unconscious, the bridge had been a persistent memory. Like the others, Hinata had recognized the beast that had caused the slaughter, but she continued to see it in her mind's eye. Her crush, Naruto, the man she had always attempted to follow, changed into something that was just incomprehensible. It moved with unnatural speed, and he quickly dismembered the bandits Gato had hired with a savagery that rivaled that of the so-called demon of the hidden mist himself. Hinata only remembered that, and she wished she hadn't. Hinata began, twitching her finger uneasily and avoiding eye contact. "Well, I remember it." She shuddered unconsciously, and went on, "I know that it was Naruto." Kakashi smiled and said, "What you witnessed back there is a total and complete secret. The Hokage wishes that no one finds out who it truly was. He was even thinking about wiping your memory." Hinata returned her gaze to Kakashi. "But he thinks that you are better off knowing, because you can help us make sure it never happens again. Because of that, I am able to reveal an S-rank secret to you, so that you may fully understand what it was you saw, and so that you may know why it must be contained." With this, Hinata's eyes widened as she realized exactly what Kakashi had told her, a secret of the S-rank. Kakashi paused to find the most delicate word before asking, "Have you ever wondered why Naruto is treated so differently? Why is he not allowed to play with children, and why does he act the way he acts?" The heiress from Hyuga gave a nod. Naruto had indeed received different treatment, and she had always been bothered by it. She had started closely monitoring Naruto after he had rescued her from bullies, and as a result, she was aware of how diligent and self-centered he is, as well as how poorly he is treated by others. Naruto was only a baby when the Kyuubi attacked the village, and the Junin told her how his sensei, the fourth Hokage, had given his life to seal it inside of him. However, since it was counterproductive to his objective, he refrained from informing her that the fox was being subdued. "It isn't Naruto's fault," he said, looking at her, "but it is a fact that humans fear that which they do not understand, and it is illegal for them to tell their children so that they might be able to understand. This is the burden that Naruto carries." On the bridge, he somehow managed to tap into the Kyuubi's chakra, and that caused him to lose control of his body, temporarily allowing the Kyuubi to control it. "The beast you saw on the bridge wasn't Naruto, but rather the nine-tailed fox," Kakashi said, pausing to allow Hinata to process the information. Her gray, emotionless eyes simply stared at him. Unsure, he continued, "Now that you know, you can help. I need to know if he is using the Kyuubi's chakra. The more he uses it, the more it will corrupt him until he is no more." After Kakashi finished, the Hyuga princess nodded and said, "I'll do it," suggesting that this had worked. "Oh, and please keep this a secret. The more people that know about Naruto and his condition, the more likely he will be rejected and treated badly," Kakashi said, grinning beneath his mask as he began to head for the exit to turn around and face the girl. All right, Hinata answered, I swear I won't tell anyone. Hinata was still thinking about Naruto in her room after Kakashi had left, and the realization of how little he knew about him made her heart sink. He was receiving different treatment due to circumstances beyond his control and that were not his fault. Anger welled up inside her as she recalled the servant who had advised her to avoid Naruto after he had protected her from those bullies. Be quiet and sit down, I don't have time for the weak. Hinata remembered everything Naruto had said to her on the bridge, and she now understood what he meant when he said that they were because Naruto had saved her. Hinata had been idolizing him all this time, but she did nothing. He didn't have time for people who did nothing to alleviate the suffering and agony that had been inflicted upon him. He believed that the weak were those who were unable or unwilling to empathize with his suffering, and Hinata now refused to be included in that group. She would do everything in her power to keep him safe. Caged behind iron bars and surrounded by a never-ending blackness, Naruto faced a massive pair of red eyes when the boy faced the Kyuubi, who was imprisoned inside him. His fists clenched, but Naruto's immense annoyance at having to confront this demon was not limited to his fists. His mouth formed a taut line, and his eyes spit daggers at the enormous pair of its eyes. The creature with those red eyes let out a rumbling growl that shook the water that gathered around the young boy's feet, and Naruto fought the instinctive impulse to run away. Assuring himself, Naruto thought, it's sealed. The blonde stood motionless as the sounds of something violently struggling against its chains reverberated throughout the room. This was the first time Naruto had been able to speak with the Kyuubi since he had returned to Konoha a day earlier. The boy's eyes left the Kyuubi's and turned to his arms as the feeling of his skin bubbling returned. He looked back at the demon and spoke after confirming that he was okay and that the feeling had subsided. What do you want? As the Kyuubi ceased to struggle against its binds, Naruto heard a mean laugh. You had a mere taste of my power, human. How did you feel? Naruto questioned incredulously. So that's what this is about. You wanted a chat about how it felt. A force struck Naruto, pushing against his body like a strong gust of wind, as another ferocious growl sounded. A mere human like you should be more grateful to the one that saved your life, but, for you, being grateful is uncommon. After a long silence, Naruto said, it felt unreal. The amount of power was incredible, and I never felt a. His blue eyes darkening as he stared down the fox demon trapped inside him. Naruto hesitated at this point, uncertain of how honest he should be. The blonde admitted, I've never felt so good, with an unexpectedly sheepish expression on his face. The nine-tailed fox demon towered over the little blonde Naruto, his eyes glowing, if not more red. Good, Naruto, very good. I could give you more, but I would like something in return. So that is what this is really all about, Naruto replied. Another attempt at getting me to release you. When Naruto heard the Kyuubi still struggling against his binds during his daily meditation, he closed his eyes with the intention of leaving the mindscape and returning to the reality from which he had been torn. Not this time, Naruto, I want something else. Naruto opened his eyes in response to this and gazed at the crimson eyes. What? Naruto inquired gravely, I want you to find my brethren. When the blonde thought about what the Kyuubi had just told him, his eyes grew wide. Was this what he asked for? Locate every tailed beast and then what? Why? How was he going to do that? Naruto couldn't comprehend why the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox, would ask him to locate his fellow demons, and all of these questions were racing through his mind. Sincere in his curiosity about his roommate's request, Naruto questioned, why? You understand what it means to be alone, the Kyuubi said, as do I. Humans do not understand us, they fear our immense powers. And so they sealed us away in vessels and separated us. As one of these vessels, Naruto nodded and realized what the fox demon had been implying. Naruto does a great job of capturing the essence of humanity and the fear that the unknown instills in people. The blonde recalled all of the looks and remarks directed at him, as well as how cruelly the people in the leaf-covered village had treated him because they didn't know, or didn't wish to know, Naruto for who he was. He also recalled the isolation he felt as a result of these people's refusal to let any of their kids play with him or even speak to him. He recalled all the scars on his body and the icy stares of the people who had caused them. Although people are not typically born monsters, they can become callous due to the callousness and ignorance of others. Perhaps the tailed beasts were no different. Perhaps they were just as misinterpreted as he was. With his red eyes staring at Naruto, the Kyuubi lied and said, I want to have contact with them, that's all. I will give you my powers. And in return I want you to find my brethren, befriend their vessels and make their powers available for you to use as well. At last, Naruto said, okay, I'll do it. Ino discovered that it was earlier than usual when she had woken up. The blonde, who had been hoping for a pleasant, relaxing day since returning from her mission from the wave, was extremely depressed by this. 2 days had passed since their return, and she wanted to take advantage of the days off she had been given, a reward from the Hokage after he learned of what had transpired. But since it was impossible to fall back asleep now that she was awake, the blonde started her day. She imagined taking a long, relaxing bath while thinking about all the amazing things she would be doing today. The blonde was excited to see the new film featuring Ino's favorite actress, Fujikaze Yukie, which came out today. After all, she and the girls could use a little cultural education, so perhaps they will see it while Sasuke and Hinata were either training or watching Naruto. Sakura was the only one who regularly watched movies. Naruto, Ino pondered. She had been thinking about the blonde ever since she had returned to the village. She could still picture Naruto and his reaction to what Inari had said. She also remembered that she should apologize to him, but she never had the opportunity because Naruto had been sent home safely after using too much chakra in his fight with Haku, leaving him unconscious. The boy had disappeared from the village after that. Once she had thoroughly soaked, she exited, patted herself dry, and examined herself in the mirror. She screamed inwardly as her wet blonde hair clumped up in a messy way, blocking one eye, and she looked around for anything that could help. Ino heard a knock on her front door just as she was about to face the world. Her mother undoubtedly went to answer it when she heard footsteps, and she quickly heard her voice calling her down. When Ino arrived at the front door and saw that all three of them were there, she knew it was one of her friends. To the other Princess 4, Ino exclaimed, "Wow, guys, I had no idea that we were getting together at my house today." Sakura smiled as she said, "We decided that we would ruin your relaxing by crashing it because we were all up." Ino stuck her tongue out at Sakura and said, "Well, I was already up, so you failed," before turning to her mother and giving her a final peck on the cheek. "So what's the plan? We going to do anything in particular?" Ino asked after she had closed the door and joined her friends. "Well," Sakura said as they all started to make their way to the village center, "we were going to eat at Ichiraku's before heading off to see that new movie." Ino exclaimed, "The one with Fujikaze Yukie?" When the pink-haired girl smiled and nodded, she let out a little squeal of excitement. Sakura and she then began discussing the films that Fujikaze Yukie had starred in and how this one might compare to those. Sasuke then asked, "Has anyone apologized to Naruto yet?" "Have you?" Sasuke asked, and Ino frowned. "I haven't seen him since we got back," she said. Each of Sakura, Hinata, and Sasuke shook their head. The blonde had not been spotted by any of them, although they had been granted a break from their ninja responsibilities. Sasuke had anticipated at least one run-in with him. Hinata's face flushed at the thought of her crush. She stammered, Maybe he is still recovering." But Sakura scowled at that assertion. "I don't know. She spoke slowly. Chakra depletion on the scale where it would necessitate this long of a recovery time is pretty lethal without immediate medical attention, and Kakashi-sensei said he would be fine as long as he rested." Hinata whispered back, "What about Haku? Maybe he did something to Naruto-kun. If he did, he would have had done it without doing any jutsu. From what you guys and Kakashi-sensei told me, he must have used a lot of chakra to produce that black fox," Sasuke said, and then, after a moment, I don't know if that story adds up. It just doesn't seem like Haku had enough chakra left after producing the ice mirrors to create a monster like that, much less knock you out before disappearing." Hinata twitched her fingers timidly, wondering how she could best get them to change the topic. "Maybe you just underestimated him," she said. As her friends discussed the events on the bridge once more, Ino had remained silent and listened carefully to the things that she thought were significant. However, as soon as Hinata asked another question, Ino's light blue eyes noticed familiar red and black clothing and the very familiar person wearing it. While exploring Konoha with the other Princess 4, Ino exclaimed, "Hey, Naruto." When they spotted the blonde, it was morning. The air was a little chilly, and the dew on the village's plants was shining brilliantly. Villagers and children were out, the latter doing their shopping while the former played. But as the blonde walked through the village with his head down, the crowd appeared to bend around him. Naruto could hear the blonde who had been yelling his name because of the quiet tension that pervaded his surroundings. The group of girls approached the boy after Ino waved at him. Every villager and child within their immediate vicinity stared and waited, their eyes on them. The girls sensed it, but they had no idea what the villagers were specifically anticipating. Among the nearby villagers, whispers started to spread. They were indistinguishable at first, but as more people joined the battle, Ino was able to make out some of the words being spoken. One voice had mumbled, "It's a miracle they weren't killed." Another said, "I've heard rumors that it ended in a bloodbath, a complete slaughter. Shame he wasn't killed. I heard they went up against the demon of the hidden mist, Momochi Zabuza." The others were silenced when a second voice whispered, "Shish. They can hear USA." They could hear them. It was true. The four girls exchanged varying degrees of glances with one another. Sakura and Ino, whose faces had never been subjected to such attention, showed signs of shock of various intensities. They did not belong to any significant ninja clans and had, perhaps, common ancestry. However, Sasuke and Hinata did not appear surprised. Their expressions became expressionless. They both came from two of the main clans in the Hidden Leaf village, so they knew what it was like to be followed by whispers despite their neutral appearance. Both of them retained a hint of discomfort, a feature shared by all girls. Naruto was the only one who didn't seem uncomfortable, or at least didn't seem so. Ino was a little taken aback by his stoic expression when the blonde turned back to face him with his hands in his pockets and his blue eyes fixed on them. He stood without a hint of embarrassment on his face. It appeared to be a machine or a shell of a person rather than a real person facing them. Even though Naruto was present and observing them, it seemed as though he wasn't there. Is this what he has to deal with every day? Ino asked herself as she looked around them with her light blue eyes. The girls were in a stifled silence. The whispers had ceased, and Ino could hear the slight breeze blowing around them, feeling it brush against the bare spots of her pale skin, giving her goosebumps. I'm fucking fine, sensei. For some reason, Ino's thoughts kept returning to the moment when an enemy ninja poisoned Naruto. The girls had neglected to care for him, instead concentrating on Sasuke, and Ino's thoughts were fixed on the look that Naruto gave them as he stabbed his kunai in the poisoned wound to allow him to bleed it all out, leaving him to handle it on his own. Looking at the blonde boy, Ino thought sadly, he always has to deal with it by himself. She was not alone, as Sakura herself displayed many of the same traits of anger brewing on her face. Hinata's gray eyes were still on Naruto, pity alive in them, a flicker of desperation too. Only Sasuke looked placid, her eyes casually glancing over the people around them. The blonde girl's face grew hot as her anger overtook her features, and her fists clenched hard, nails digging into the palm of her skin. Everyone's eyes went to the black-eyed Uchiha princess as she said, Naruto, we were wondering if you would like to spend time with us. Not only did Naruto's eyes widen at that comment, but so did the eyes of many of the villagers who were observing, and a new round of whispers began, the disagreeable tones and sounds of which finally prompted Ino to take action. Glancing at Sakura and Hinata, she said, Yeah, Naruto, asking, what do you think? Do you want to get together? Sakura gave Naruto a supportive smile, and Hinata gave him a shy nod while keeping her gray eyes fixed on the boy. Incredulous and disbelieving whispers still filled the air, but they were mostly silent, and the looks of the villagers told Ino all she needed to know. Shooting disapproving glares at some of them, Ino approached Naruto, who gave her a suspicious look, and took his wrist to guide him to the group. Now, everyone's attention was on Naruto, and everyone around them was waiting for the boy to respond. So, what are all of you observing? As she walked to Ichiraku's with Naruto, Sakura, and the others, she yelled so that everyone could hear her. It was a long walk to Ichiraku's, and all the way there was silence within their party, with Hinata walking behind Naruto, her eyes still focused on the boy. Sakura and Ino flanking him on his right and left, Sasuke, who had taken the initiative to ask him, in the front, Ino's eyes scanning the surroundings, and no one speaking, in part because they did not know what exactly they could say to the blonde after the events that had just transpired. When Ino and company arrived at Ichiraku's, they discovered Ayame serving an unidentified Junin who was slurping his ramen in silence. His black sunglasses glinted in the morning light, and Ayame gave him a kind smile as they approached, another bowl of ramen ready to take the place of the first when he was done. This is another bowl of our famous Ichiraku miso ramen for you, Ebisu-san. As they walked up the ramen stand, the Junin pushed his glasses up in determination, ready to eat another serving. When his peripherals detected the group approaching the stand, his eyes landed on Naruto, and he stopped eating, chopsticks in the middle of their journey towards his mouth. These words were said by the serving girl, who cheerfully replaced the bowl that had just been finished. Let it drip. Let it drip. The broth that had clung to the noodles that were wrapped around Ebisu's chopsticks ran down their lengths, and dropped back into the bowl. The slight smile he had at the thought of another serving had vanished when he saw the blonde, and the Junin set down his chopsticks with a tiny clatter on the steaming hot bowl. When Naruto and company sat down, Ebisu got up, threw down the money on the counter for both bowls and left the ramen stand without a word. The girls had noticed this behavior, and while they sat down in their usual configuration, they exchanged meaningful looks with one another. However, if Naruto had noticed, he certainly didn't show it. In fact, Ino noted as she glanced at the blonde, it didn't seem to worry him at all. He just took Ebisu's seat and waited to be served. The forgotten ramen, which was still steaming hot, lay in front of Naruto, who eyed it nonchalantly. At that moment, Ayame, who was spurred by the sound of new customers, came back from the kitchens to serve her new customers. Greetings from Ichiraku's. She greeted her customers with a smile and said, How may I assist you? She wore a puzzled expression when she saw Naruto sitting in the seat that Ebisu had just occupied, but it was fleeting because as soon as her gaze shifted to the hot bowl and back to Naruto, she realized a somewhat sympathetic expression emerged. Naruto-kun, another one? Quietly, she added to her earlier statement. Yeah, Naruto replied, pushing the cash on the counter forward so Ayame could get it. Is it yours to have? Ayame and Naruto both nodded toward the steaming bowl in front of them. You might as well, Naruto-kun, it's the least he could do, Ayame remarked, a little upset that the poor boy would have to endure this hardship once more. That was the last time he'll eat here, she sighed. When he heard her, Naruto remarked, it's bad enough that I stop people from eating here in the first place, and the blonde sighed, grabbed the bowl, and grabbed the chopsticks. I don't want to be the cause of even more customers not making purchases from you. Ayame started to say, you might not want, but the blonde interrupted her. As he wrapped noodles around his chopsticks, he declared, Ayame, I don't care about people hating me anymore. A long time ago, I lost interest. You might not care, but I do, Ayame shot back, her eyes reprimanding Naruto inaudibly. Ayame looked at the blonde who had been sitting to Naruto's left with surprise, as if she had forgotten that she had other customers. Naruto simply looked at Ino and continued eating the Ichiraku miso ramen. Excuse me, Ino finally said, interrupting the conversation. Oh, I'm so sorry. As she quickly took out her ordering pad, Ayame said, what do you want? When she didn't return, Ino's gaze shifted to Naruto, who was eating his food, and she noticed a hunger in his blue eyes as he ate the ramen in front of him with barely controlled voracity. She wrote down the orders for the girls separately and rushed back to the kitchen to warn her father. Tucci. A depressing thought crept into Ino's mind, and Ino's eyes widened. How much does he need to eat? He must be starving. It must be difficult for Naruto to have good, nutritious food if the attitudes of the villagers and Ebisu were any indication. Since he had no parents, he had no real source of income for years of his life. How did he manage to survive? How could she have missed it? At the academy, no one really paid any attention to Naruto, other than to laugh at his constant tardiness or to complain to their friends about him. No one even bothered to inquire about his home life or what he had to eat. How could everyone have overlooked this? Throughout the time the blonde knew Naruto, he must have been starving and suffering in silence, never complaining about the amount of food he had to eat. Never gripe about anything. When Ayame left with promises that Hinata's and Ino's would be arriving soon, Ino turned to the other girls and gave them a look that said, I think we should apologize to him now. When they all said that they were willing, Ino turned back to the blonde and cleared her throat, which had surprisingly become dry. Ayame had brought out Sakura's and Sasuke's dishes. Naruto? She asked hesitantly, feeling anxious when the blonde's bright blue eyes were fixed on her. She began to perspire, but she wasn't sure why. The blonde had never been good at saying things like, I'm sorry, and even if she was at fault, she would just keep being stubborn until the other person, usually Sakura, gave in or they forgot what they were fighting over. She wasn't nervous, though, because she felt bad about the way she acted. She feared it might not be sufficient, which made her anxious. Ino bowed her head and said, it was wrong of us to forget about you, and for that I am sorry. She gestured to the girls as well. I just wanted to say that I am that we are, she said. 3 pairs of eyes watched Naruto, who sat there, still, until it became quiet. The other 3 girls had all expressed the same sentiment in different ways. All Ino could hear was the commotion of the village. A tiny, strange-looking smile appeared on Naruto's face. He said, thank you, and then he turned back to his ramen. As she hid among the shrubbery of her family estate, Sasuke's knees felt the soft dirt. The 5-year-old was covered in dirt and grime on this sunny, humid day, but she couldn't be happier. He will never discover me. Wildlife sounded all around her, and Sasuke heard the desperate chirps of a flock of young birds, probably calling to their mother for food, before the noises ceased, warning Sasuke that someone had woken them up. She thought she heard the familiar sounds of sandals on soft dirt and twigs snapping, and squatted lower to the ground, her small back rubbing against the leaves that obscured her small form. It must have been seconds, but to Sasuke it felt like hours, before the sandals moved away from the bush in which she was hiding. That was close, she exclaimed, letting go of the tension that was coursing through her entire body. Her heart was pounding rapidly, and her mind was racing when she noticed, through the leaves, a familiar pair of blue sandals standing motionless in front of her hiding place. Never relax, even when you think the danger has passed. It was obvious that she had been found, but she felt stuck in place, paralyzed with fear, and her heart skipped a beat as her black eyes looked through the leaves again, trying to find the owner of the voice, but he was nowhere to be found. She loved playing hide and seek because, if enough time had passed, the game got more thrilling with every second that went by. There were moments when she thought it wasn't a game, if enough time had passed. She had already begun her shinobi training and was familiar with the traditions of her clan as a Uchiha, so every time she played hide and seek, it was both a sport and a test of her abilities. "I'm not there. Sasuke." Sasuke's heart leapt to her throat as she heard the soft voice coming from everywhere around her. She was horrified to see a pale hand rise through the dirt in front of her, level with her eyes, and tap Sasuke's forehead with 2 fingers in a way that was amusingly familiar. "Got you. Not fair." With her typically pale palms marred by dirt, Sasuke pouted as she emerged from her hiding spot. "You promised not to use your Sharingan." The voice said, "Foolish sister, do you really believe that the opponent will follow through on his agreement?" A boy of 11 years old had leapt from the ground in front of Sasuke, his eyes blood red in the sunlight, his face marred by 2 distinct lines, a faint smile on his face, and his hands had shown that he spent more time poring over books than smearing his hands with blood. "HMPH, Sasuke said, still pouting, obviously unhappy, with her arms crossed and her back to her brother. "Itachi, using your Sharingan isn't fun." Even after the 5-year-old pouted, Itachi continued to smile and remarked, "I'm training you, Sasuke, it's not supposed to be fun. You never give me any real training." The two had a family resemblance, with the raven black hair, black eyes, and facial features that typified her clan. However, Sasuke's skin was full of color because she spent most of her time training with her father, at his request, while Itachi was pale. Sasuke turned back to him, her arms still crossed, and glared childishly at her older brother, but knowing that she could never be seriously angry at her brother, her glare broke after a few seconds into a slight smile that mirrored her brother's. With an amused expression on his face, Sasuke's older brother said, "Well, perhaps I should begin." After saying that, Itachi's gaze strayed to their home and he said, "It's time to eat." Sasuke didn't know what it was that had caused the strain in their relationship, and she didn't want to ask, but Itachi's statement destroyed the good vibes that had been building between the two of them ever since he had been inaugurated into the Anbu Black Ops. Her father had always been aloof with the girl. It was well known that when Sasuke's mother, Makoto, became pregnant, her husband had wanted a boy, had been discussing the idea for months before the pregnancy, and had even chosen the name for his child, Sasuke. In spite of the fact that she was born a girl, her father had refused to accept the fact that she was a girl and had named her Sasuke in spite of his wife's protests. Fugaku had forced Itachi to begin training her at the age of 5, which was much earlier than most of her contemporaries. Although he had a good relationship with Sasuke, Itachi was always quite private about his opinions about people. He spent most of his time buried in books. Even at the family dinner table, Itachi seemed almost inaccessible to his parents and to Sasuke when she was younger. However, this was exacerbated by the fact that he intimidated his peers. Itachi was a ninja prodigy, graduating first in his class from the academy at the age of 7, mastering the Sharingan at the age of 8, and being accepted into the Anbu Black Ops just this year. It was amazing, and few people could believe that someone like him could exist, but there he was, walking back to the Uchiha house with his younger sister. Makoto had brought them their meal as Fugaku discussed the training session with them after they had seated themselves at the dining room table. Itachi told his father it was satisfactory, adding, "She is getting better every day. She will undoubtedly become a ninja deserving of recognition at some point, in my opinion." "Well," Fugaku said with a grunt, turning to face his daughter with expressionless black eyes, "she is a Uchiha." Itachi winked at his younger sister, demonstrating that he doesn't need the Sharingan to have more insight than those around him, but Sasuke, who had been sitting quietly during their conversation, felt her heart sink. She had hoped that the news would please her father, but the shadow of the Uchiha name obscured her accomplishments from his eyes. It was a clear and sunny morning, and Sasuke wasn't going to let this moment slip from her fingers. She was tired, holding shuriken in her hands, which were cut and dirty from the hours of training she had been doing. Her clothes were torn and badly burned, and her breath was labored, but her training session was far from over. It had been 5 days since she had returned from the wave, and it had been 5 days of intense training. She was horribly outclassed in her last mission. Haku had been faster and much stronger than she had expected, and if Naruto hadn't stepped in and saved her, the entire mission would have been a complete failure. Something Sasuke still couldn't accept. Her fingers tightened dangerously around her ninja tools as her mind relived her battle with Haku. She threw the shuriken at the training post, which was scorched to a crisp, and with 3 thumps, the shuriken embedded themselves deeply in the post, and Sasuke, after catching her breath, walked over to the post to inspect the spread. It was a tight spread, almost perfect, but the third and final shuriken had not embedded itself quite as deeply as the other 2. If the mission to the Land of Waves taught her anything, it was that Sasuke needed to strengthen herself. That was not acceptable. Sasuke took out the shuriken and retreated, prepared to fire another salvo, when she heard the damp sound of footsteps on the grass approaching her, since the training grounds were typically empty at this time and Sasuke had never seen anyone here before. She was taken aback when she heard someone else move. When the Uchiha turned to face whoever it was, Inuzuka Kiba said, "Sasuke-chan. Fancy seeing you here. You training as well?" As it scrambled with his master, Akamaru panted and yelled at the girl. Without responding, Sasuke turned to resume her training. Although Kiba was undoubtedly annoying, she would not be threatened by his presence, so she prepared her shuriken and threw them with lightning speed and pinpoint accuracy, putting more force into this throw to make up for the lack of piercing depth she had experienced in her previous run. "Yup, I come here once a week," Kiba said, yawning and extending his arms, unfazed by the lack of attention. "Gotta practice with Akamaru here." The puppy barked when his name was mentioned. Kiba rubbed the back of his head and grinned at the idea of spending time alone with his crush. "Perhaps," he added, "we could get together here once a week to train together. It might be like going on a date." Sasuke, who was headed to get the weapons she had thrown so skillfully, paused and faced the pest. She could put up with him training alongside her, provided they kept their distance from one another, but obviously that was not Kiba's intention. As she gazed down at the Inuzuka, she said sharply, "We've been through this, Kiba. I am, simply, not interested." "Oh, hurry up." With frantic motions, Kiba yelled, "You haven't really given me a chance? Who knows? Perhaps I am the person you are seeking." "That's the thing," Sasuke said, "I'm not looking." "Maybe," Sasuke interrupted, saying, "No, you don't understand." Kiba would never comprehend the sense of complete necessity. Right now, everything else was a distraction, and distractions just get in the way, and her only focus was to fulfill that desire to which she has dedicated everything and will devote everything until he, her brother, is dead. She needed to train. She needed to become the best version of herself, or else she will fail. The last Uchiha thought about her friends, who she initially considered a distraction and tried to cut off from her life and focus only on training, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to do so. Could this happen again? Could she fall in love? In all honesty, Sasuke never gave love, romance, or dating any serious thought because she was young and had become a ninja, which makes it difficult to build lasting, stable relationships with people. A friend of today might not be there tomorrow, or even turn against you tomorrow. Additionally, ninja life, and genins in particular, tend to be painful and short. When the only future one may have is tomorrow, how is it possible to imagine a future? "What I don't understand," Kiba said angrily, "is why you constantly turn me away. Do I not measure up?" As was always the case with Kiba, Sasuke rolled her eyes even when it was stated directly to his face. He was never able to understand the message or the hint. As she prepared to speak to the boy, she inhaled and exhaled while keeping her gaze fixed on Kiba. She opened her mouth to attack Kiba, but she turned to look to the right when she heard footsteps approaching. She first noticed the whisker lines, and then the blonde hair caught her attention. With his hands in his pockets, Uzumaki Naruto was making his way to the training area where Sasuke and Kiba were now when the boy appeared. Kiba's eyes followed Sasuke's and he growled. Akamaru did the same, his white hair standing on end and his teeth exposed. As Sasuke's black eyes scanned Naruto's feet, he noticed Kit, Naruto's black fox, scuttling next to him and yipping joyfully at being released. When the black fox saw the puppy and the boy, Kit's tail whipped and his eyes fixed Akamaru, who snarled louder and flashed his teeth more aggressively at the black fox. The fox had been slithering between his master's legs. Kiba snarled, "What are you doing here, dead last?" With a change in body language, Kiba turned to face the blonde in a pose that conveyed just as much animosity toward Naruto as Akamaru did toward Kit. However, the blonde merely glanced languidly at Kiba before turning to face Sasuke, who was observing Naruto with non-threatening interest. Kiba started off perilously. "I said, what are you doing here?" Finally turning to Kiba, Naruto said, "I was taking Kit for a walk. Got a problem with that?" The black fox's yellow eyes never left Kiba's companion as he yipped at the mention of his name. Kiba frowned at Naruto, her face flushed pink from the pain of Sasuke's rejection. He was clearly embarrassed that Naruto had caught him in this predicament, and that embarrassment had turned into rage at the Jinchuriki. But Naruto's response was a look that made it clear how little Kiba means to him. The boy looked at Naruto with deep hatred, as if the look Naruto gave him had a profound effect on him. "Yeah," Kiba said, a little feral in tone, "I do, Sasuke-chan and I were by ourselves, so get bent." With a quick glance at Sasuke, Naruto said, "Doesn't seem like she's that interested in you." Kiba stepped forward menacingly and shot back, "Oh, yeah? What would you know about that? No one's ever been interested in you?" Naruto retorted, "That's exactly how I do know, dumbass," and Kit yipped in response. Kiba's face flushed at that comment. Kiba resisted Naruto, the dead last, showing up. Kiba rolled into a fighting stance and said, I'm tired of this, you and me. Right now I'm going to beat you so bad, you'll want to leave. Finally, before Naruto could take action, Sasuke said, stop. As the Uchiha moved between Naruto and Kiba, two sets of eyes watched her as the Inuzuka walked. Sasuke kept her gaze fixed on her, turning to face him when she stopped before taking up a fighting stance. She glanced back at Naruto. If you want to fight someone, fight me, Sasuke replied. I need the training, and you want to prove yourself. Kiba said, Sasuke-chan? As his fight stance wavered and he stepped back. Sasuke promised him, I'll go on a date with you if you win. Sasuke said, however, if I win, you never bother me again, got it? As Kiba's face brightened a little. The Inuzuka considered it after graduating. He had intensified his training and had at last started to learn some of the more combat-useful jutsu of his clan. The use of nin dogs as combat support was a specialty of the Inuzuka clan. Kiba glanced down at Akamaru, who was still glaring down at the black fox and growling. At this thought, would it be wise to fight Akamaru now, when he was still young and developing? Would it be sufficient to defeat their class's genius, Sasuke? Kiba's train of thought was interrupted by Naruto's voice. I don't need your help, and the boy turned to face the blonde. I can handle him myself. Once again assuming her fighting stance, Sasuke turned to face Kiba and glared at Naruto, saying, not everything is about you, you know, besides, adding, I've been waiting for a good fight. Naruto looked at Kiba and said, he's the worst in our year, so you won't get one from him. Kiba shouted at the blonde, shut up. Naruto made up his mind to show them what he was made of after saying that they would later come to regret not estimating him more. A smile appeared on his face as he returned to his fighting stance. You want to fight? Fine, but I'm just letting you know, I've improved a lot, isn't that right, Akamaru? Kiba grinned as he turned to face the Uchiha heiress. Akamaru, barking affirmatively at his master Sasuke, said, good, and Kiba stiffened his muscles in preparation for the fight. As the two looked down at one another, a hush fell over the room. Naruto heard nothing but the chirps of birds that lived in the wooded area surrounding the trio. With his blue eyes fixed on his teammate, the blonde took a step back but did nothing else. Naruto had been eager to see Sasuke's skills ever since Wave. When he gave him a taste of what he could offer, she did engage in combat with Haku. But it was hardly a convincing demonstration of her prowess. Haku was far too powerful, and Naruto was certain that he would have beaten Sasuke and himself to the ground if the Kyuubi hadn't stepped in. Naruto turned to face Kiba as he exclaimed, Yahoo! Let's do this, Akamaru. Kiba squatted, closed his eyes, and made a hand signal as Akamaru gave a resolute bark. Kiba was engulfed in a wild electric blue chakra that licked his body like flames. The girl raised an eyebrow in surprise and mild amusement as the Inuzuka's Ninken growled at Sasuke. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Maybe Kiba would also give him a good demonstration of his skills, known for their prowess in tracking and nin dog skills, which included a special kind of bestial taijutsu. The Inuzuka clan was well known. Although the blonde had heard tales of its power, she had never witnessed it in use, much less during combat. When Kiba opened his eyes and went to his knees, a savage grin appeared on his face. Naruto saw that Kiba's features had turned dog-like and his nails had grown so long that they no longer resembled human features as the chakra that encircled his body swung violently. Kiba snarled, ninja art of beast mimicry, all fours jutsu. Kiba abruptly vanished in a flash and resurfaced behind the princess of Uchiha, his hand poised to swat at the small of her back. Sasuke had even less time to react, and Naruto hardly had time to comprehend what had happened. Kiba yelled, got you, as he made a horizontal cut across Sasuke's torso. Rest in peace. Although there was the sound of tearing clothing, which stood in sharp contrast to the serene chirping of birds, it appeared that Kiba had only damaged Sasuke's clothing because Sasuke had jumped forward in time to avoid getting hurt, leaving her pale flesh exposed. She turned to face her opponent, and Sasuke remarked, you're pretty fast, I clearly underestimated your speed. Kiba growled and dug his nails into the ground, ready to strike again. I'm just getting started, he said. Sasuke felt a sharp pain at those words, and she recalled how the Inuzukas battled alongside their dogs. She told herself in her head that she had become so focused on avoiding Kiba that she had forgotten all about Akamaru, whose small body was swinging in midair while his teeth dug deep into Sasuke's already bare skin. Here I go. Kiba yelled as he leapt off the ground and charged at Sasuke with nearly undetectable speed. However, it appeared that Sasuke was prepared for the assault because she leapt as hard as she could vertically as soon as he launched himself in her direction, Akamaru barely hanging on as the dog's teeth moved in the wounds, cutting more. The girl flinched in agony, but she was able to ignore the pain and concentrate on winning this fight. Fire style. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Naruto witnessed Kiba stop himself as the fire burned, leaving a massive blackened blemish that continued to smoke as the fire consumed the available fuel. A giant ball of flame threw itself downwards towards the ground where Sasuke was only standing. Kiba, clutching his hands to his face and writhing at the strong smoke odor that had filled the air around them, exclaimed, That's foul." Sasuke had not finished yet as she descended. The final Uchiha positioned her body horizontally and retreated toward the earth. Naruto knew immediately what she was going to do. In addition to discouraging Kiba, she had employed that fireball jutsu to increase the danger to Akamaru, who would now be the first thing to strike the charred ground if nothing was done. If the puppy's spinal column took the brunt of the fall alone would be more than enough to paralyze it, but with the fire still smoldering, the likelihood of Akamaru dying was high. Kiba must have recognized this as well because he yelled, "Let go, Akamaru," over the boy's coughs and retches. The puppy winced in agony as Sasuke felt her teeth come loose and her tiny paws kick off her back, and Akamaru was soaring toward his master. Then, as she dove into the smoke, Naruto lost sight of Sasuke now. Naruto could only hear Kiba's noises and the hiss of the smoke. Staring into the smoke, the blonde's blue eyes searched for anything that might even vaguely resemble his teammate. Kiba attempted to avoid the 3 kunai that shot straight at the Inuzuka out of the smoke, but only one of them made contact with the boy's flesh before slicing away. Kiba clutched his face, a cut on his right cheek, and screamed, "Ow! What are you trying to do? Kill me." From the smoke, Sasuke's voice said, "A shinobi must always fight with the intention to kill," suggesting that she was alright, or they will never succeed against their opponent. As she charged the Inuzuka, hurling a flurry of shuriken and kunai, Sasuke's face broke through the smoke as Kiba was busy avoiding them. Naruto's blue eyes narrowed at the sight of his black-eyed teammate, who had lost her black eyes, and he noticed something that had made him pause. Sasuke's red eyes caused Naruto's eyes to narrow. The Sharingan. Naruto had no idea how Sasuke had triggered the renowned bloodline limit, but it was there, right in front of him. As he saw how much the eyes helped its user, the blonde's fists clenched. She was faster than Naruto had ever seen her before, but it wasn't her speed that startled him. Rather, it was her capacity to anticipate and mimic his opponent's movements. He could scarcely have believed that something so powerful could exist in the eyes of some people, but he had read about the Sharingan in the library, trying to learn as much as he could about any exclusive asset of the leaf that they possessed. Though he had seen the red eyes before, this was not the first time he had seen them. Kakashi had also had one, but he had only used it as a last resort, and Naruto only saw brief glimpses of its potential in the Land of Waves. Sasuke, who had hardly time to react before using the bloodline, was able to counter every attack Kiba launched, even making fun of him by imitating his fighting style and using it against him when he countered. This was not the case, though, and it was clearly visible. This was the Uchiha's actual power. "This is bullshit. Come on, Akamaru. Let's get serious," Kiba screamed after Sasuke had once again rejected his attacks. After barking, Akamaru bounded over to its master and slammed his jaws. Naruto watched as Kiba produced 2 black balls from his waist pouch. Food pills. During the Third Great Shinobi War, the military of the Land of Fire created them to crush their adversaries. The black balls would metabolize and cause an exergonic reaction when consumed, releasing a quantity of chakra that precisely doubled the user's reserves and giving them so much stamina that they could fight non-stop for 3 days, but at a terrible cost. After using the supplement repeatedly, the user may experience severe episodes of anxiety, fatigue, and paranoia due to the enormous strain it can place on the body. Death, at times. When the small animal ate the food pill that was thrown to him, Akamaru's fur turned brown, and its growl deepened, making it more fierce. Knowing the effects of the pills, Sasuke charged at Kiba, attempting to stop him from taking the second food pill, but Akamaru blocked her way, diverting the girl's attention long enough for Kiba to swallow it. Kiba was surrounded by blue chakra once more, and as he displayed his K9s, a fiercely savage smile appeared on his face. Kiba growled, "Come, Akamaru," and the brown-furred puppy complied by leaping back and landing on Kiba's back. Naruto's gaze was fixed on the two of them as Kiba made a hand gesture and exclaimed, "Man-beast clone." In a puff of smoke, the untamed, brown-furred Akamaru disappeared, revealing a flawless replica of Kiba Inuzuka, snarling viciously at the Uchiha heir, who gazed at the two, one on the other's back. With her Sharingan eyes flashing ominously, Sasuke asked, "A clone? Is that all you got?" Angry at Sasuke's response, Kiba retorted, "TCH, you won't be saying that on our date." Gazing down at the two, Sasuke shot back, "Get real, loser. I've been fending off every single attack. Do you really think that a clone will change anything? I won't blame you for not realizing the position you're in. After all, you know nothing of the Inuzuka clan's abilities, Kiba said, laughing at the girl as she narrowed her red eyes at him. You see, Kiba said, gritting his teeth at Sasuke, only with a beast clone can our taijutsu reach its full potential. As she assumed a defensive stance, aka Kiba gave her a menacing bark and Sasuke's eyes widened. All you've been countering is my fighting style at 50%. After leaping off Kiba's back, aka Kiba landed on all fours and gave the girl with the red eyes a fierce look. Then, as Kiba had done before, they both disappeared in a blur, and Naruto looked around Sasuke's grounds. Normally, Akamaru's age would prevent him from keeping up with Kiba's speed, but now there were too many enemies who were too swift and well-trained to cooperate perfectly. The outline of the two Kibas was finally visible to Naruto's blue eyes, and she saw with wide eyes that one had materialized in front of Sasuke and the other behind her. The Kibas launched their attack in unison. The one in the back swiped at her legs to knock her off balance, making it very difficult to avoid the attack. The one in front of Sasuke slashed at her torso, forcing the girl to jump, duck, or lean back. She would be almost impossible to move in a way that would leave her safe, even with Sasuke's Sharingan, in order to compress herself and avoid both attacks. Sasuke used her legs to push off the ground and bring them to her chest, but it seemed that both Kibas desired this. Both of Sasuke's opponents quickly reversed their momentum and attacked him. The girl cried out in agony as she was severely wounded by the pair's combo attack, which left her with deep, bloody gashes on her back. Yahoo, we got her, Akamaru! Exclaimed one of the genuine Kibas. You ready to give up yet? Kiba asked, glaring at the girl who was lying face down on the ground. Not even remotely, said Sasuke, scowling at the boy who had just spoken. The two were left wondering where she was when Sasuke abruptly disappeared in a cloud of smoke. They began to sniff the air, but Sasuke was hidden because the smoke's scent still overpowered their sense of smell. Where did she go? Kiba cried in frustration. The clone gave him a bark that also expressed his perplexity. Sasuke's voice called out from the tree line behind her opponents, ninja art, hidden mist jutsu, and then a dense, hazy mist fell upon the clearing, obscuring everything from Naruto's perspective. In addition to the sounds of Kiba frantically moving around, probably in a desperate attempt to find a way out of the mist, there was the distinct sound of kunai flying through the air and embedding themselves into trees, but to no avail. In an attempt to learn more about the only jutsu he had ever seen that could completely disable the Sharingan, Naruto researched the hidden mist jutsu on his first day back. The more he learned about the jutsu, the more impressive it seemed. Only the land hidden in the mist was authorized to teach this uncommon talent in an effort to keep their edge over the bloodline limit and the other villages, who were equally vulnerable to the jutsu's effects. The hidden mist village made it an exclusive skill due to its effectiveness against the Sharingan. It was now in Uchiha Sasuke's possession. The blonde was reminded of the land of waves by the salty scent and the cool mist. Sasuke's voice echoed through the fog. 8 points. Naruto heard the voice from right next to him, and he felt compelled to look over his shoulder because it seemed to have come from everywhere, with his deep gravelly voice piercing the hearts of all 6 genin. Zabuza Momochi, demon of the hidden mist, had done this to instill fear in them. It was utterly terrifying when Naruto first saw it, but it has since developed into a useful weapon in the Uchiha princess's toolbox. The Uchiha did not simply imitate ninjutsu, it appeared. Larynx. Naruto heard a terrified barking sound coming from Akamaru as the sounds of footsteps grew more frantic. Heart. There was silence as the footsteps ceased, and Naruto wondered what was happening as well. Spinal column. Sasuke's voice whispered dangerously into Naruto's ear, making the hairs on his neck stand on end. Jugular. Kiba turned around, and Naruto heard it. Kidneys. Kiba yelled. Why, you aren't going to scare me? But Naruto could tell by the tremor in his voice how he really felt. Lungs. Fang over fang. Kiba yelled, and she heard the wind howling as something moved quickly through the confusion. Little fragments of tree bark splintered the blonde, gently striking him as Naruto heard a tree being viciously attacked by Kiba's attack. Naruto heard a whine before the sound of a puff of smoke abruptly interrupted it. Akamaru must have been eliminated by Sasuke. A flurry of thumps must have alerted Kiba to this as well, and Kiba's footsteps rushed to where his companion must have been. It's okay, buddy, you're going to be just Phinia. Liver. Thump. 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 Naruto heard 3 more kunai quickly ensnaring themselves in the trees surrounding the blonde. Naruto had to quickly step aside as the 4th headed straight for him, and his eyes widened. Kiba was alerted by Naruto's footsteps, and the blonde was suddenly confronted by Kiba, whose ferocity was heightened by Akamaru's injury. Naruto had to dodge the attack after the red-marked boy swiped at him. Kiba moved toward him, assaulting Naruto as though he had caused his friends harm because of Kiba's speed. Naruto narrowly avoided the barrage of attacks that were directed at him. Head. As the fog dissipated, Sasuke appeared directly behind Kiba, her twin Sharingans glowing red in the sunlight. Her kunai ready to cut his throat. The boy froze in front of Naruto. Even a small movement could cause his blood to spill needlessly. "It's over," Sasuke declared, placing her kunai against Kiba's throat and twisting his back in a chicken wing with her other arm. "You lose." Kiba exclaimed, "The hell it is," but then yelled in agony as Sasuke tightened the chicken wing. As a result of Kiba's reaction, the kunai pricked his throat, causing a tiny stream of blood to fall from it. Kiba then looked down at the drops that had reached the dirt. Naruto's blue eyes scanned the ground past Sasuke and Kiba until he noticed Akamaru's tiny figure curled up on the ground, unconscious from whatever Sasuke had done to him. It was obvious that Sasuke had won because Kiba had been disabled and Akamaru had been knocked out. It would most likely be Kiba's final action if he moved at all. "You can't move," Sasuke said straight out. "Akamaru can't help face it, you're done." With his left hand hanging by his side, Kiba hung his head in resignation despite his growl. Kiba muttered, "You winna," and Sasuke released him, pushing him forward. As he gazed at the blood dripping and flowing from the kunai, Kiba glared at the princess of Uchiha while clenching his fists and baring his teeth. The reply from Sasuke was, "I wouldn't glare like that, you might want to head off and fix that." After noticing the cut from her eyes, Kiba reached up to apply pressure and, without saying a word, approached Akamaru and took him in his arms. Naruto's blue eyes lingered on Sasuke, who had begun cleaning the kunai that was smeared with Kiba's blood. After Kiba had left the grounds, his eyes then turned back to Black Kid smiled at the girl as he sat down on his hind legs. The quiet sound of the surrounding fauna was broken by the black fox's joyful yap as it glanced at Naruto before turning back to Sasuke. Sasuke looked up at Naruto as he broke the silence by asking, "How did you activate your Sharingan?" Before she could respond, she had cleaned her kunai and put it away. "I managed to activate it just before I lost consciousness on the bridge." Naruto recalled Naruto had been shielded from the flurry of needles by Sasuke. Naruto's mind was filled with the image of Sasuke, his clothes ripped, his breath ragged, needles sticking out of almost every place. Sasuke had activated her Sharingan, but he must have been too distracted by the whole thing to notice. Naruto remarked, "I never did thank you for that," his blue eyes darting to the floor with a hint of shame. "No need." After Sasuke's answer, there was a prolonged pause, and the subject had caused the blonde to reflect. He had considered whether he would give his life to save anyone, even his best friend, while he was in the wave. Despite his apparent coldness, Naruto had a lot of work to do with his life if he was to fulfill his dream of destroying the village hidden in the leaves. "Your dream?" With Naruto's words, the girl turned to face him, her black eyes fixed on his face as the memories that so frequently plagued her reappeared, fading only slightly, never entirely. They never left. On a chilly, lonely night, she could see her mother's smile, her father's grim recognition, and her brother's Sharingan's red eyes staring down at her. She said tensely, "Yeah, but what of it?" He was immediately reminded of the tragedy that Sasuke had gone through, the massacre of the Uchiha clan, as the blonde's blue irises focused on his face and saw the anguish of loss all over it. Although Naruto was not entirely aware of the circumstances surrounding the carnage, there were rumors that attempted to solve the mystery. While some of these whispers were implausible, recounting the events in graphic detail, others were more rational, containing ambiguous tones and scant information. But there was one thing, no matter how gruesome or timid, that both whispers agreed upon. It had been done by one person. "You said you wanted to restore your clan and kill a certain someone." Uncertain of what to say next, the blonde paused. To be honest, he had no intention of speaking to the girl at all, but he found himself speaking, and now he was confronted by her scowl. "Why would throw it away to save me?" The question made Sasuke blush a little, but Naruto didn't appear to notice. To be honest, she didn't really know why she had placed herself in front of the blonde and protected him from the rush of Senba'en that infiltrated her. She didn't give her actions any thought. They were instinctive. Kakashi's remarks about teamwork had led her to believe that she had done it, but the more she considered it, the less she found that to be the case. She would have benefited from saving herself just as much as he did if she had been truly concerned about teamwork. "I don't know," Sasuke finally admitted to Naruto, who was still looking for clarification. "I have a dream as well," she replied. "A dream that I have been striving toward my whole life." This brought Sasuke back to the day of her assignment and the words of Naruto's self-introduction. She had considered him unworthy of her time and effort that day, but now she was reconsidering. Undoubtedly, the response was ambiguous, but Naruto's tone during his introduction suggested that it was much more than that. Naruto heard Sasuke ask, "What is it?" The training ground was breezed by a mild wind that blew in the wind caused the leaves to sway slightly, and the subtle scent of salt and smoke permeated the air around the two, combining to create the distinct scent that Sasuke detected as she studied Naruto's face. Her eyes grew wide. She remembered the blonde's face because she often saw it in the mirror, and it revealed his inner turmoil. My dream is to get rid of my pain. Sasuke was familiar with these terms and their connotations. She desired it. She felt the pain of anger in addition to the pain of sadness. She was violently inspired to exact revenge on her brother by the way it bubbled and burned inside of her. The only things that kept the rage at bay were temperance and promises, but only just. Sasuke was aware that Naruto had never lived with his parents, but he still felt the anguish of being the target of the villagers' ire. He had endured this pain all of his life, but Sasuke was fortunately not to experience it. Both of them wanted their pains to be taken away from them, but they each had their crosses to carry. The blonde sat awake on his bed in the dead of night, wondering why he had told Sasuke his true feelings. With its nocturnal light streaming through his window, the blonde gazed out at the bright moon for very clear reasons. He had been extremely evasive when asked what his dream was the day he was placed in Cell 7, but he wasn't quite as evasive when he responded to Sasuke. His response was extremely revealing, more so than he may have intended. Naruto's thoughts returned to his angry outburst at the wave and his remarks to Inari. "You don't fucking know what it is to have nothing." Though it wasn't an emotional outburst prompted by anger and inattention, his conversation with Sasuke wasn't the first time he had expressed his genuine feelings to others. It was a more personal decision. Naruto had wanted friends since he was a young child. This was an innate desire that the blonde could never fully suppress, only smothering him in his efforts to get by and now accomplish his objective. But in some ways, Naruto thought Sasuke was more like him. She always aimed to be the best and surpass everyone who came before her in the academy, and Naruto had only seen a small portion of her suffering on the day they were placed in the same cell. The blonde recalled that he merely used her introduction to explain her diligence and didn't give it much thought at the time. He was too preoccupied with himself to be concerned with the suffering and motivations of others. But something in him seemed to have been roused by the girl's apology to the blonde. An unaccustomed sense of joy had glowed dimly inside him each time he rehearsed the apology in his mind. He couldn't figure out why it made him happy or why his thoughts kept returning to it. Although Naruto hasn't received many apologies, he discovered that they usually don't mean anything. The blonde occasionally found himself thinking about one of the girls, wondering what and how they were doing, so the consequences of their apology to Naruto went beyond just a pleasant memory. However, Naruto refused to accept this and would try his best to distract himself with other thoughts whenever one of their faces appeared in his mind. Naruto had the option to turn around or continue walking when he noticed Kiba harassing Sasuke. Although he had no business knowing what other people were up to, Sasuke's expression made it obvious that she had not been enjoying the conversation, and oddly, Naruto felt obliged to break the ice. Perhaps it was his way of making amends? Perhaps he also confessed to Sasuke? Naruto was not persuaded. With blue eyes, Naruto turned his gaze from the window to the clock on his bedside table. He looked back at the moon and sighed at how late it was. He ought to be asleep by now, and this will undoubtedly have an impact on how well he performs when he meets the rest of the team for training tomorrow. After concluding that this was a mystery best left for another day, Naruto closed his eyes and got ready for sleep, being careful not to wake Kit.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.